Welcome everybody to the November 9th Planning Board meeting. I think the first thing we'll do is do a roll call for all the planning board members. I keep looking at my screen. I'm going to close it. There's nothing to look at. So let's just go off of what I can see. Andrew Boardman.
Here.
That looks like Haley. Yep. Haley Orwell.
Yep. Here.
Linda Fuller.
Here.
And then Burton Smith is not here. Ferguson.
Here.
And Kate Eckerman.
Here.
And myself, Nathan Bob, said I'm here. All right. So the first thing on the agenda for tonight is a review of or a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding 5B Seymour Street. And we do have on there.
Molly Obendorf is with Stan McNary.
Molly Obendorf is here to walk us through the plans for that. So we can, you want to go ahead and share anything you're going to share and just walk us through?
Yep, absolutely. For the record, Molly Obendorf with Stamsky McNary. I'm representing the applicant Matt Hall, who is also on the call with us today. So this is a property on Seymour Street. It's just under 13,000 square feet in size. And it's going to be a single family, it's a vacant lot currently. And we're proposing a single family dwelling with 2 bedrooms. And due to it being in a nitrogen sensitive area, it does require treatment for the system in order to provide the 2-bedroom. The way that it gets broken down is by size of the lot. And by right, you're allowed in a nitrogen sensitive area to have 440 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. So by right, and as Elizabeth put in her planner's report, this property is allowed 1 bedroom. But we are requesting a 2-bedroom in this case, and we are providing that treatment in order to mitigate the nitrogen loading. So first, I would actually like to make a correction. I reached out to the manufacturer about the effluent and the total nitrogen that the FAST system reduced it to, and for residential properties with less than 2,000 gallons per day in flow, actually get 19 milligrams per liter instead of the 25 milligrams per liter. So the total nitrogen loading for the 220 gallons per day would actually be just under 16,000 milligrams, which is much closer to the conventional system for a 1-bedroom, which is about 14,500 milligrams. I would also like to point out, again, Elizabeth, thank you for providing your planner's report today. We really appreciate that. It mentioned drainage just going to daylight. I would like to speak to that briefly. The foundation drain, it's groundwater. It doesn't need to be treated. It's just groundwater. Also, we show those on all new homes. There was no signs of groundwater on this property, and there is a very small likelihood that this would see any sort of flow. Similarly with the culvert under the driveway, due to slight regrading in this area, we didn't want to create, it's kind of ironic because we enhanced the low spot, but without enhancing the low spot, there would have been a low spot anyways. And that just prevents any puddling on the property. And this is flow from, above the property. So again, it's just overland flow. It's not driveway runoff or anything like that, so it doesn't need to be treated. With that said, we are happy to provide some sort of infiltration for the dwelling. I know we're in, a sensitive area and near the White Pond, So we're happy to provide some sort of infiltration for the dwelling with regard to that. And I also wanted to speak to the size of the lot just in comparison to the rest of the neighborhood. We are requesting, like I said, a 2-bedroom system on this just around 13,000 square foot lot. And the surrounding properties, this is just from the GIS and also just information from the GIS and property cards for the surrounding lot sizes. So just in comparison, like I said, it's a 2-bedroom system that we're proposing, just under 13,000 square feet. And I will start, because it is a private road, and we did confirm this with DEP, we are allowed to use up to the center line of the roadway of a private road for nitrogen credit. So that's the additional 5,000 square feet and why we're allowed to have the 2-bedroom with treatment on this property. But just in comparison with the rest of the neighborhood, right above us, we have a 2-bedroom that's just under 12,000 square feet. We have right next to us a 3-bedroom that's just under 17,000 square feet. Across from the property, a 4-bedroom with 14,000 square feet, 1-bedroom with half the lot size as we're proposing, 2-bedroom with just under 10,000, 3-bedroom with just under 10,000. So the 2-bedroom on this lot is very commensurate with the neighborhood as a whole. And, you know, like I said, we are providing that treatment for the effluent to help groundwater in the nitrogen sensitive area. So that's pretty much it. And I will open up to questions. I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you. So I have a question. With the change in the total nitrogen output that you mentioned earlier, is that something you'd be able to share with us from the manufacturer, since we're basically that change that you described made it,
Absolutely.
as you said, very close to the single family.
Yep. I have an email stating that residential systems under 2,000 gallons are allowed that 19 milligrams per liter. So I can certainly provide that.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, can
You're definitely going to have to speak up.
Elizabeth, can you just explain what the standard of review is and what we're looking for here?
So there have not, this type of special permit is not often. In the almost 6 years I've been here, I think we've only had 2. So I can't say that there's an established standard. The issue with this location, and you know, I understand Molly's presentation as far as the houses that are around this. I can't speak to when they were built, how they were built or how the septic systems were approved. But although DEP has now, for some reason, stated you can use the area of a private road in the calculation, that doesn't, that might be fine for DEP, but it doesn't mean you get to have a 2-bedroom dwelling. This is in a groundwater conservancy district. And if you go over 440 gallons per 40,000 square feet, it's a special permit. The concern that I raised in the report is that the use of that roadway, private roadway area, has historically never been permitted. And for this particular area, that does have, implications as far as, the redevelopment of the area. So I think it is a concern. I'd be, interested in, with, as Nathan said, with, if that calculation for this fast system is 19 and not 25, I'd be interested in knowing what that calculation comes out to if you don't include the roadway area. And then you really are comparing apples to apples. I think that makes a difference in how you look at it, because I agree, Nathan, 14,000 and I don't even remember what I wrote, 14,000 and change, that's not much different than 16,000. But if you take out that roadway area, how does that change that calculation?
And I have a question too. If the roadway area is included for other developments that don't commit to this in advance, would it require a special high efficiency system, or would it just be you're including the roadway and all of a sudden properties can add extra bedrooms because they have more infiltration space?
Yeah, it does not, I don't think it automatically means that somebody has to use an alternative system. Somebody could have had just below 40,000 square feet of area and they only have a 3-bedroom system. But if you included the roadway area, they might have had enough space on the property to build a 4-bedroom system. And they got to take credit for the design using that roadway area. So I don't think it necessarily automatically means you have to use an alternative system. This property is, significantly less than 40,000 square feet. So I think that's where anything under 20,000 square feet, which is what's required for a 2-bedroom system, I think does then push you into having to use an alternative system for to get a 2-bedroom. Anything over 20,000 square feet, I think it depends on how much over 20,000, how close to 40,000, and how much area of roadway you have, and in the design of, and how you design your house.
And I know you mentioned it here, because of the way the system is designed, that there's, a fan and a pump and everything like that. So how loud are we talking about?
I have no idea. That was a comment the health director brought up, that, I mean, it runs continuously.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can speak to the noise of the blower. I did ask the manufacturer about that as well. And just in comparison, a general AC condenser is between 50 and 70 decibels. And the blower is between 40 and 60 decibels. There is also an option to have a subsurface blower, which does also reduce the sound from that.
Did they give you any idea of what that decibel output is for the subsurface one?
Not for the subsurface one, but yeah, less than the 40 to 60 decibels.
I would hope, yes. I mean,
so I mean, that's one, one element. I mean, it is not cheap annually to maintain these systems as well. And while the initial septic system permit that gets issued, they have to provide a written executed contract for that first year. But then it becomes an enforcement issue that the town does not have the ability to every year go around and say, send me your executed contract. You can't. It's not like a building permit where you can stop work, or you can't tell me you have to move out because you can't use your septic system because it's not failing. It's so it really becomes an enforcement issue as well.
so basically,
maintenance.
in the event that that the like, additional aspects of the system fail, like the pump and the fan or whatever, does it then just operate as a standard
No.
septic system? So
No,
does it have a
It just
higher
fails.
failure threshold? I'm just trying to
I-
understand what happens.
I don't know. It is not like a standard system.
Yeah.
It's, it requires a significant, much more maintenance and, testing to make sure that it's working properly. That's as far as I know.
And it's being proposed. And so Molly, why is the microfast system being proposed?
It's being proposed in order to reduce the nitrogen loading on the property, in order to provide that 2-bedroom. So there's a calculation, basically the fast system, the by right calculation is you're allowed, like we were saying, 440 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. And that's just by right in any nitrogen sensitive area. With the fast system, you can actually increase that. For residential properties under 2,000 gallons per day, you can increase that to 660 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. So then you kind of use that calculation and use the lot area and back calculate what you're allowed for the flow for the property. And in this case, with the 19 milligrams per liter and the 660 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet, by right, we are just under, and this is not including the roadway area. We are just under that 220 gallons per day at, I believe, 213 gallons per day. So that 660 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet and the 19 milligrams per liter does make a significant difference with regard to the system and the treatment.
Right, but the microfast system is intended to treat the waste faster in a like that,
Correct.
by manually doing something that would normally be done just passively, right?
Correct. Yep. It's a circulating filter that removes the nitrogen. It provides more TSS removal as well. And so the effluent is significantly treated before it even reaches the leach field.
Are we asking questions or are we deliberating now? Can I just say what I think?
I'd probably
so-
ask for public comment first, but
You want to do that there?
no.
Anybody? I can't see on that.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
If you'd like to comment, if you can use the raise hand function.
I don't see any hands raised.
Then, okay. Go ahead.
This area is of such concern to everyone in town. We know that the system is under extreme stress to the point where the resource of White's Pond is unusable now, a lot of the time. I agree completely with Elizabeth's take on it, which is that this is not to the benefit of this property, the neighborhood, or the town. It's just added risks in terms of the nitrogen loading and environmental impact. If anywhere we were going to push the boundaries of using a special permit to approve more intense development, this would not be the place. I would think that we would be doing everything we can to avoid having somebody come in and do something, more intense than they are allowed as of right. So I just don't, I can't see any reason for giving any kind of positive indication to this. I agree. I think it's a really sensitive area. And I think there's probably other issues with existing septic tanks, and I do not want to do anything to exacerbate the problem. How about a 1-bedroom with a microfast? Like that's what someone should be proposing here, right? then it would be a little bit mitigate what would be normally by right.
Is there anybody else from the planning board that would like to comment?
My only comment would be, I think that this kind of property, given its location and the sensitivity, would be the kind of thing where development by right would be highly scrutinized to make sure it crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And anything beyond that would really be suspect in my mind. And here with, again, White's Pond being closed the entire summer due to as yet undetermined issues, adding additional stressors, including potentially a lot of nitrogen or more nitrogen into the system, just seems like an unnecessary risk.
I agree. I don't have anything to add, but I agree.
Not gonna come back on.
Okay. Can you hear
Andrew,
us
can
now?
you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was just saying that I agree with everything that's been said so far, and really the only thing that changed, from reading this before is, the information that Molly got from the manufacturer. So I know that it would change, my my decision on this, but it would be good to know sort of what the final numbers work out to be, or maybe you already were you working on that over there? I'm not sure. So I think that would be helpful to make a final decision, that can, have some certainty about. So I don't know if that would be something that you would work with them to confirm.
So I would imagine that Molly will provide an updated information for, to take this to the Board of Appeals. Or it's whether, Molly, you would like to provide that to the planning board and have them continue discussion. It would require you to continue out for the Board of Appeals to see if additional information, for the board. It's
I also know that sometimes you can call a manufacturer and kind of see how far you can push it, but there's a reason the first number was out there in the first place. So like, there's kind of two, if you really kind of push something with a manufacturer, they can give you a more aggressive rate, but there's reasons why that wasn't the first rate. So I just want to state that as just my experience, in terms of putting something into the record that's like an email from a manufacturer or something that's like an informal conversation like that. It's not always sort of the guaranteed.
Well, that's what I was
Right.
hoping. I guess my question to
Yeah.
Molly was whether the specs that you stated from the manufacturer, if that was something that was published by them or something they told you directly when asked. I'm just trying to understand the circumstances around how you got a different number.
Yeah, so that's a good question and a valid point. I think it was something that was just overlooked and not completely understood at first. The 25 milligrams per liter is for commercial properties and anything over 2,000 gallons per day. So anything above that threshold is the 25 milligrams per liter. Residential under the 2,000 gallons per day is always going to be 19 milligrams per liter, and that 660 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. I'm sure I can find the literature. I would I guess, like to know if that would change any of the board's minds to have that information, or if just having that information, it would still come to the same decision. I think that would help us determine whether or not we do want to continue with the planning board or not.
So I think for me, the reason I'm asking this is because by right, somebody could come just build a single bedroom with a regular septic system and have up to that same nitrogen level output. Is that right?
No, it would be 14,560. And then the fast system at the 19 milligrams per liter would be 16,000. So slightly
more.
more.
But is that for a 2-bedroom versus a 1-bedroom?
Yes.
And that's using the actual property line as
No.
that's going to the center of the street
Yes.
in both cases.
Well, so the nitrogen loading calculation, it's not based on the square footage of the lot. That's just what the calculation is for that system and the number of bedrooms. What in the groundwater conservancy district and under Title V for nitrogen sensitive areas, because it's a public water supply, is they have developed a standard where it's 440 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet, which so you have 40,000 square feet in which that level of nitrogen is dispersed. So you can go to a 2-bedroom if you have 20,000 square feet, and it deals with the area of disbursement. So if you look at it, if the fast system, it's 16,000 microliters for a 2-bedroom system, it's being dispersed over either 12,943 square feet or 18,185 square feet if you take into consideration up to the center line of the 2 roadways.
Okay, but under no circumstances with a 2-bedroom, even with the microfast system, with the new nitrogen loading, would it be as low as a 1-bedroom standard septic system? Output wise?
No, I mean, the output's still the same. It's either 16,000 or 14,000.
14,560. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
Did I get that right, Molly? It's
Yes. So the one bedroom without any treatment, without any fast system would output the 14,560, and then the 2-bedroom with treatment with the new calculations would output 15,800.
oh, 15,800. Okay, before it was 16.
So speaking for myself, that doesn't make a difference. I think with the 1-bedroom, it's less and it's less risky, and there's less concerns with maintenance and also noise. So it's either way for me, it does not make a difference. It's still a no.
Yeah, I'm in that camp as well. If it's more than what's applicable by right, it wouldn't be something that would really impact me one way or the other. If it's marginal, it doesn't really matter.
So should we take a vote tonight?
So I've written up the additional comments that board members made, and I would recommend that they just be added to the report, which gets turned into a recommendation letter that goes to the Board of Appeals.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if somebody wants to review that letter before it goes, that'd be good.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Does someone want to make a motion to that effect? Make a motion that, well, I mean, are we basically then saying that we're Not
Recommending
Yeah.
denial of the proposed two-bedroom system special permit under the Groundwater Conservancy District based on the planner's
planners?
report and the comments from the board this evening.
Yes, the drafted planners report with the to be added comments. We'll take that as the as the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's just go down the line. Kristen?
Yeah.
Right. Kate?
Yes, the yes to the no.
And
Yes. Do we do it? I think we should do it with prejudice. Do not recommend it with prejudice.
Why would you have to recommend it with prejudice?
Because I just.
I think your letter is.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's
we're
pretty
basically
complete.
stating
Go
yes.
forward, please.
Linda?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
And Andrew?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes.
There's enough good details in there that the
Yes.
ZBA would be able to read the data and also our comments if they're included.
All right. Should we?
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Molly. Should we skip to item number 5? Get that. That's the
Oh.
Sunnyside Lane.
Yeah, so a definitive street improvement plan has been submitted for Sunnyside Lane. The plans and documents are up on the planning board's current documents website. The developer, the applicant has met with town staff. We raised a number of issues and concerns that the developers going back to their engineer to redesign the project to address those concerns. I don't know, I'm not sure when they're going to be submitted yet and how the the timeframe flows. The board has 135 days in which to submit their decision to the town clerk. The applicant has indicated they will, work with the town and the board, if the time extension is needed. There's some potential legal questions as far as, rights to do certain improvements in the private way. So I'm just recommending as an efficiency, I don't know what it's going to look like when the plan comes in, but for efficiency's sake, that the board just authorize the use of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53G, which allows for the hiring of an outside consultant for which the applicant pays for to either review stormwater drainage, or if the applicant's legal counsel provides an opinion on certain things, we can have town council review it.
And when did that 135 day clock?
I haven't done the clock yet. The application was submitted on September 23rd. So when I did speak with the applicant today, and I just want to, you're going into a next very busy 2.5 months before the warrant closes. So just kind of want to make sure that when this does move forward, that we're not, because of something like this, we're not having to, try and catch up.
Okay. Any other?
I mean, I don't see any reason why we would not.
Yeah. Same here. Any questions from other members of the board? Okay. Then I make a motion that the board should move to authorize the hiring of an outside consultant pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53G, for the review, if needed, of the Sunnyside Lane definitive street improvement plan application submitted by.
Oh. By
Yeah, that's not bad.
AWMW.
AWMW LLC.
Yes.
On September 23rd, 2021. And second.
Second.
Thank you. Let's go around the room. Kate, Kate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Linda,
Yes, thank you for looking ahead, Elizabeth.
Haley,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and this is Nathan. I'm also a yes. All right. Is there interest in new, and these are both longer discussions, either the Thoreau Depot or the floor area ratio discussion first? I feel like the last couple of times we've got Thoreau Depot first. Do we want to do floor area
that's
ratio
nice.
first?
I'm looking for that email from Elizabeth that was, her takeaway from the town council. Which was important.
Yeah, if I have, I guess I do have it here.
Do you want me to,
Well,
do
I mean, so are we
Yeah.
officially taking this up?
you want me to bring up the slides?
Sure,
Yeah. let's
because
discuss
I was
floor area ratio.
undeterred by that email. I mean, I thought it was clarifying, but it wasn't anything that would stop our current, I think, plan of action. Well, I think it's good because I think not only were they, I think this is instructive not only just to using an incentive, but I'm assuming it's instructive as to how low we can go, even if we're not using an incentive. Like, I'm assuming that if our standard bill wouldn't pass it under the incentive scenario, then if we take the incentive away and that's just our new rate, that's sort of the same standard idea of what's going to be okay. Is that?
I think if you were to pass a floor area ratio that limited, people to a 500 square foot home, it wouldn't pass the attorney general. I mean, there's even a reasonableness in the current FAR as it relates to planning boards, the town's right under zoning to address, bulk and height, and scale. So, and you do that in setbacks, height maximums, and floor area ratios that meet that reasonable test.
Okay.
So if you had your standard setbacks, let's say for residence B, 20 in the front, 15 on the sides, and 30 in the rear, but your FAR effectively only
Expands it.
allowed a 500 square foot house, so your setbacks are 50, 60 and 80 or something. I don't think the attorney general would find what's the term? The FAR would be found overreaching. And so I think the concern I have, which from town council's email and what Andrew had raised at the last meeting is where is that line? So the board started this discussion with what the current standard FAR isn't doing much, and Andrew did the some of the analysis, which I think is gonna, be part of the presentation at town meeting. It really hasn't done much. And as far as, limiting the issue of mansionization, which the town has been talking about since 80s. So if you start with that idea of, so lowering it, how far do you go? And then I think from there, it's the sustainable FAR is slightly higher than that. And then it's, what is that distance of, slightly higher? If it's 100 square feet, there's not a single developer who's going to do that. If they get an extra 500 square feet, which is, a two-car garage, yeah, they may do that.
Okay. All right, so that actually, that does lead us nicely into the slides.
Okay.
I think that that's good. I thought we were
So,
gonna get completely derailed from the slides, but
so why don't you bring that?
yeah.
Okay, sorry, maybe. maybe
No,
that's what
no,
I'm
you
about
wanna
to
talk
do then,
about
I don't know.
No, so you wanna talk about the email some more?
Yeah, I just want, so I had another take to what he was saying, one of the last two sentences of the bulk of his email was, because he's saying that if you aren't changing the FAR requirements in the bylaw, but giving more FAR with EVs as an example, EV chargers as an example, that's probably fine. Like, okay, that's the scenario where we keep things as they are now, which we don't want to do, and we add more. If you are significantly lowering the allowable FAR, which I would think that what we're, never mind the sustainable FAR, to get to an area where you have an effective FAR that mitigates, curbs mansionization to some extent, it has to be a relatively substantial change to the FAR from what it currently is. Then, and folks can only get a useful, I mean, that's sort of a subjective term, but
Sure,
amount of FAR with an EV charger, that will look like regulation. So my takeaway from that is that perhaps we don't want to do these things together. Let's address the original problem first. And at some point in the future, either this planning board or another planning board can take up then adding on to for the sustainable FAR. I worry that if we do them together, it's going to be exactly what he's saying. Because we need to do a substantial cut to the FAR to address the original problem. And then we want to add some FAR back for the sustainability aspect. But I just worry doing them together, we may end up getting nothing.
Yeah, but I think doing them together makes it more palatable, not less, right?
But he's saying, if what you're doing makes it look like you're driving people to only do the sustainable one, then that's where you're going to get caught up.
See, but I think that was kind of my first point, was if the standard is so tough that in comparison it doesn't work, I don't think that standard works on its own either. That's my takeaway.
No, I agree. I understand the direction that Nathan is going. I somewhat agree. I think you have to lower the FAR, the standard FAR, you are going to have to come up with the data and the facts that, Kate and Andrew, put together and come up with that, getting it lower. And I think that's where it's going to be. The Attorney General has said FARs are an allowable tool to, address that issue of, size and, and bulk and, the town's, character in the neighborhood and those types of things. So I think you have to establish that with those facts that you have. And then that's the first part. And so you get to that first part, and here's the facts. And then that's where you get to with the standard FAR. And then if somebody's allowed to go a little bit higher than that with sustainable measures, and that truly is an incentive, I think that would be fine. So I think you have to come up with the factual data to get the standard down. And that reasonableness where it's, it's not the 500 square foot example.
So I have some facts. Do you need to present first?
I think so.
Go, let's do that.
Is your fax the email that you sent me? Yeah, that's, because that's a part of it.
Good, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I don't have there's no title slide on this presentation.
That's
This
okay.
is just the first section is an overview of this mansionization issue. And some of these slides are gonna look familiar to the folks who were on the board last March, because these came out of there. But this is just you can at a glance see the impact of mansionization in terms of the footprint, in terms of the mass. On the left, we have a typical ranch style house. On the right, we have was right next to it where a ranch style house was torn down, and this is what was built. So this is what looks very familiar to us, I'm sure. Next slide, thanks. So this is we took as an example this property at 5 Black Duck Road, which was under construction at the time. And we compared it to the abutters. So you can see the bottom line of this is you can see with these new homes, how close they get to that allowable FAR. So here they butting right up against that FAR where these abutters are way under the FAR. So it goes to show you with these new builds that people are building right up to the max, and you can see how much bigger this house is. And we had some pictures in the other presentation that showed you in order to build a house of this size, you have to cut down trees, you got to do a lot of grading. There's a retaining wall now. It's a big change to the neighborhood. And this neighborhood in particular is one that is just starting to turn over. So this is why we picked this one, is to see, if we could think about starting to do something, this would be a good example. And by the way, this isn't right in the center of town. This is on the outskirts of town near Bedford. Okay, let's go to the next one. So I just want to make this point again, which is if you look at the trend for housing in Concord, one thing we know is mansionization. We've been studying it for decades. It's an issue with these smaller houses getting torn down and replaced by much, much larger houses. The other thing that's happening at the same time is probably related, is that we're under all this pressure to build new housing to replace that smaller housing for both the missing middle and also empty nesters who want to downsize to something that's not a really, really large house. So if we just think about the net impact of that, it's certainly an increase in developed footprint and of Concord in terms of the pervious surface, and also in terms of the loss of trees, in terms of massing, in terms of the visual aspect of the experience of being in Concord. It's development and its intensity of development. Okay, let's keep going. So you guys have seen this slide before too, but it's just putting this in context. What Elizabeth said, we've been studying this for a long time, and just looking back to 2002, there's really concrete things that the town has done, including hiring a consultant to come up with ideas on how to address this. And one of those ideas was the FAR. And that was ultimately passed in 2016. And that's the FAR that we have today. So what is FAR? Should we keep going? The floor area ratio is the measurement of a building's floor area in relation to the size of the lot that the building's located on. So it's a way that we can look at the bulk or mass of the building. So we know that. And so looking at the current bylaw, there's a formula that's provided for across all the zones, and I won't read the formula to you, but I just want to note to you guys, because we kind of tend to forget this, that, and I always get confused because I get confused about what gross floor area means, which I still don't really know, but the way that the number they're using for FAR is the living area, like no, tell me.
No,
It's not the living area.
no,
Tell me what it is.
no. So the floor area rate, so living area, only realtors and the assessor.
Oh, does living area include the basements?
So,
Finished area, was that what I was saying?
so only, yeah, so only realtors and assessors use, living area or finished areas. And, how they calculate or advertise something. The floor area ratio is based on gross floor area, and gross floor area is the measurement of outside wall to outside wall for any space that has a ceiling height of more than 6'8". So, so let's say you have an attic, and it's, 10 by 10 square, but it's a pitched roof. The gross floor area is only going to include that space that has a ceiling height of greater than 6'8". So in a basement, if you have a ceiling height of more than 6'8", that can be included. So let me just, I can just read you the definition and that might help. Gross floor, the sum of the horizontal areas of the floor of a building measured from exterior face of an exterior wall or from a center line of a wall of two buildings that it's a shared wall, so like a common wall. But not including any space where the floor to ceiling height is less than 6'8". So it's the actual
Right, because it's meant to address the intensity of the land use and the bulk.
and the
Right,
bulk.
It has,
Correct.
it's not, has
Has
nothing to do with living area.
living area or finished area or anything.
And that's
Gross-
not what we're trying to regulate anyway. We're trying to regulate the.
The gross floor area is just the actual structure and.
And
any
that's what
space
you're
over
showing.
6'8".
That's what you were showing kind of in those pictures. We were able to visually see that.
So when the FAR was, first went through and you have underlined, excluding from that gross floor area just for the FAR,
Yeah.
basements, because they're normally underground and don't add to the bulk.
Yeah.
Opened or screened porches, which are, usually more open and don't significantly add to the bulk. They're usually not on the second floor or a solid, or accessory structures like your shed, which isn't on a permanent foundation and less than 100 square feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when I was pulling data though, wasn't I pulling from the assessor's cards? But I was doing that with you, right?
Right, so.
So we did something that worked.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's some of the benefit. that you
So,
did.
so the assessor does have, the physical area of.
Yeah,
But they have it in like two
the
columns.
two columns, yeah.
One is considered like living area.
Yeah,
And one's, so they include everything
yeah.
in that list. Oh. No, it's when I was trying to get help with the speaker, I called somebody, they're now calling me back. No, you pulled from the
Okay,
correct data.
So it's
I
just
mean,
semantics. I think I may have mislabeled some of these homes, which I can correct label like later on. In terms of just calling it living area, and it should be, so it's really is gross floor area minus basements and decks.
Open and screened porches and
open
decks.
stairs, that's it. Okay, got it. Okay. So let's move on. Sorry. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the impact of the old FAR back in it was either March or July. But we know that they were looking at data maybe 2000 to 2015 when they were setting that FAR, and the way they did it is they were looking at the homes that kept coming up in conversations about what was of concern to people. They looked at what size that was, and then they kind of made a determination that that's where the line would be. So one thing that we tasked ourselves with on this board was to look at the time period 2016, 2020 to see what the impact of that FAR was on those years after it was implemented. But of course, we can't see the homes that were, made smaller, but we can see them. We don't know the avoided impact because the homes were all built, to the lower threshold. But one way that we could look at what the potential impact would be is to look at the trends in housing leading up to that point, and then see how they changed in that 2016, 2020 period. So I did do that. So that's new in here. If you could scroll down a little bit, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just telling Chris. He's just panicking. How can I help you?
Okay, so if you look at this 2000, that's nice that you have somebody that's like that.
Yeah.
If you look at this data set, so I just took this 5 years to, well, it's 6 years, 2010 to 2015. That FAR that was implemented in 2016, it would have applied to 28 of the homes of the 160 that were built. So that's where they put the line. The average lot size of those properties, those 28 homes, is 14,000 square feet. And then the average of how far those properties were over that amount is around 1,000 square feet. And the total across those properties of how far they exceeded that amount was 29,000 square feet. So that gives you some idea of the impact of like sort of the retroactive impact that they were trying to avoid. So now if we keep scrolling.
Okay, wait, just to clarify, so
Yeah.
you're saying the 160 new homes were built in that time period?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So now if we look at that data set going forward, 2016, 2020, and apply that same rate. Oh, sorry. So looking at this data set, there's 109 homes, it's one fewer year, it's 4 years. I was thinking through 16, 17, 18, 19. This is 5 years compared to 6. There's 109 homes. You can see the average price here of the tear down. I think that's really instructive because that's sort of the missing middle we talked about. And then after rebuild, we see this $1.7 million home that's quite expensive. And then if you look at that distribution of data in that missing middle place, there's 47 that are under 600 and there's 18 that are under 500. And then this just gives you another little just snapshot of what these homes are, because that usually over these eras of home building were sort of consistent. So you can see a picture of Victorian or a ranch or whatever it is. Let's keep going. Also, I wanted to show the distribution of where these homes are being rebuilt, because we've just had some discussion of like, is it important to apply this to C, residence C or B, or where is it? So here you can see 38% of the homes are in that 20 to 40,000 square foot lot range, but there's a lot happening in C and there's a lot happening in A too. Wait, right, A, yeah.
So
40 to 80 is A, right?
yes, 10,000 is residence C, 20 is residence B, 40 is residence A, and 80 is residence AA. But what would be interesting would be to graphically show these, because just because a lot is between 10 and 19,999 doesn't, it could be in a residence C zone district, it could be residence B, it could even be a residence A. So I think I can work with our GIS analyst. And if I just have the list of addresses or parcel numbers, she can graphically show those.
Yeah, and I think that's like, there's that question at the bottom that says, can we use size as a proxy for residential zoning districts? Because that kind of came up in some of Nate's comments, that an exchange that we had was, do we want to regulate things by zoning district? And so that would be great to see where they are.
So I think the floor area ratio has absolutely nothing to do with the zone district.
I agree.
It's lot size. So it kind of really doesn't matter what zone district it is. So I think the previous conversations that the board has had, the chart you had originally done where you're looking at, different floor area ratios and the lot size and the square footage of a house you could get. I think that is, I think that works.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you would put that into the zoning bylaw, because currently the zoning bylaw is by district. Right now, it works because it's the same in all 4 districts. So that's something I'm gonna have to,
Yeah, well,
Kinda
right
think
now,
about.
we're kind of, well, the thing I'm proposing as of late is the same across all, anyway, so we can talk about whether that works or not. But let's keep going. Okay, so now we're talking about looking at sort of the impact of the FAR 2016 to 2020. So if you do that and you apply that same kind of trend that was happening before, you get about 25,000 square foot of avoided build. So, and the trends were pretty consistent. So I think that's actually a reasonable way to look at what was the impact of this. I think it's reasonable to, between 2016 and 2020, like overall, there were, it's around 25,000 square feet that was captured by the FAR. That's the way I would say that. So, okay, let's keep going. But that's, okay, so let's talk about where we are in the process. First of all, we're looking at this issue because we decided that it's a goal for this year to revise the FAR bylaw. So far, we've kind of settled ourselves in context of where we are in this issue in the town's history. We analyzed the impact of the existing FAR. We've deliberated on the idea of including the green building incentive, which I think is still kind of at the top of our minds. And then we've also talked about a couple of different proposals on a FAR, but overall, it's been very consistent feedback that it's not aggressive enough. Like we're not really addressing the issue. It's just, it's not enough. So that's what this proposal is trying to really get at. And by the way, I reached out to some folks on the board on this who have been more vocal about having an idea of what this should look like. So I want to credit everyone who gave me feedback, which was Kaylee and Nate and Kristen. So thank you. And I was not talking to them together. So, so Kristen did something interesting. And I just want to make sure, everyone gets credit for, looking at this. Kristen, why don't you say what you looked at?
I looked at the median size of completed single-family house based on government census. I also looked at average finished area, just kind of as some data points. I looked at some average size of homes in Massachusetts, which reflect northeastern, homes. And then I looked at LEED for homes rating system that when you get a LEED certified home, if it's a larger home, it's actually penalized, so you get less LEED points, and smaller homes are rewarded. And then it's got a kind of a neutral size that's recommended. So trying to kind of look at it, I know this is square footage, but at least to try to understand, what are the averages, both, nationally and in our area by, fact-based sources to see whether we were going to end up in the ballpark when we came up with a number. So 900 and some thousand single-family homes completed in the year 2020. The median size was of a single-family house was 2,261 square feet, with an average finished area of close to 2,600. Then that's kind of from the government census.gov. The average finished area is from NOB, which is National Association of Home Builders. And then in Massachusetts, the average size of the single-family home is 1,744 square feet. Average home sizes have increased 11% in Boston since 1910, but the city's population density and limited land have led it to having some of the smallest homes in the nation, right? So now we're kind of thinking about character, and then the LEED certified, it says LEED neutral size recommendations range from 900 square feet for a 1-bedroom house to 2,850 square feet for a 5-bedroom house. And so just so that we have some kind of numbers, right, that are based in some fact. So that's what those were.
So that was great. And then it just so happened that when Haley looked, I gave her an example lot to look at and just said, what do you think would be here? Her numbers kind of aligned with these numbers. That was nice that you guys were kind of aligned. And then so it seemed like we were kind of zoning in on something that seemed small enough to people.
Well, reasonable though. It was
Reasonable.
reasonable based on kind of a number of things.
So
And I mean, Kate, just to mention, like, all I did was look at like what in your case study, like what's exists today is in like the surrounding, like what is the character today on average, and it's about what it should be. But the problem is those houses are getting torn down and something much bigger is being done in Concord. So it was just like logical looking around your neighborhood, you know.
is that my doubt?
It comes and goes with hearing it better here. It's fine. It'll come back.
Okay. We're so close to getting to like the.
It's all right. As long as I can hear well.
Okay, so let's just take, for the sake of this discussion, let's say 2,200 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lot. And this is a little bit bigger than what you guys wanted, but 2,700 on 20,000. So let's move on. So here's a formula that's getting closer. You can see, so the top one is what we have now, and the bottom one is what you get with this new formula. Oh.
I like it.
That's a nice reaction.
I like it.
So these aren't, with some of the input that we've gotten, some folks wanted even more reduction for those larger lots. If we do that, we need to switch to a more complex formula, more like what Lexington has. In Lexington's is for commercial, but so let's keep going. So here's an idea for something that's more aggressive. It's this
One thing about switching for larger lots is you're not actually allowed to regulate floor space for the sole purpose of regulating floor space. So once you get to the larger lots, obviously like the houses can get bigger because the floor area ratio sort of stops being relevant. So you're probably never going to actually touch those in a way that's reasonable. And you're better off just setting a standard that's enforceable.
But we are trying to limit the intensity of land use, even at the larger lot.
No, I understand that. But I when I played with the numbers too, when you get to the largest lots, you're sitting there saying like, by right of 20,000 square feet seems crazy, but there's really no way to do it using a floor area ratio. There's got to be another mechanism.
I also think you would have a difficult time when you're talking about regulating size, bulk, scale. If somebody has a 12-acre lot,
Yeah.
I do. It's kind of walking that fine line of what the zoning act allows a town to do.
Yeah.
And the other goal of the town as far as sustainability. I think they can come together when you're looking at the smaller lots. I don't think they come together when you're getting into lots that are, 2, 3, 4, 5 acres or more. So sadly, that's just a realization of the state zoning act. But I think when you look at 80,000 square feet, which is a 2-acre lot, it might be interesting to find an example of a 2-acre lot that has a current house close to that 5,700 square feet, and visualize that as far as the size, bulk, and scale with the neighborhood. So I can also work with I can work with the Jill, our GIS analyst, and see if that's something that she can, you know, quickly just do and find.
Yeah, yes. That might be just on our list of new homes written built for 2016, 2020. Like we might just happen to have one that size. Okay. So what I did was I went back and applied this formula to that 2016 and 2020 data set to see how many homes would that impact. So it's a very high sort of capture rate. So there's 133 new homes in that data set. So this new formula would have impacted 107 of them. And you can see I did the average square foot of impact. So that average square foot impact is the average square foot that new home was over, you know, what this new threshold would be. So you can see it's quite significant. So on these, you know, it's 1,000, 1,300, 1,400, 1,900. That's substantial. So I think we said that the existing could have captured about 25,000. So you can see this is going way beyond. It's almost 160,000 total square feet that it would be avoiding. So let's see what do I have. So I think going forward with the discussion, it's the several prongs that we've been going to, which is this what you wanted to see for where this should be set? And then, you know, maybe the bullet 2 and 3 kind of go together. You know, is this reasonable? Is this within the zoning, you know, fact? And I think we're pushing the bounds either way. I think with something like that, we would be. So I think that what we want is necessarily kind of going to be doing that. What do you think?
I think it just all comes down to the facts that everybody has pulled together, you know, including, you know, Kristen's facts and Andrew's facts and the, you know, the before and after, you know, what would have happened if, you know, we had the lower FAR. And I think if something is factual based, then, you know, there's a basis for town meeting, if, you know, and town meeting agrees and passes that. I'm not sure, you know, exactly how the Attorney General goes through and, you know, establishes things, but any zoning bylaw that's, you know, on a factual basis that still meets the you know, purpose and intent and allowed, I'm going to say allowed jurisdiction under the Zoning Act. I'm not sure what grounds the Attorney General would have to disallow it. But also, you know, if you start with this factual based limit, but you get to town meeting and there's, you know, still, you know, some anxiety, you know, with, you know, different things, somebody may try to do an amendment on the floor of town meeting to, you know, increase them, which, you know, is not, I'm always very, very hesitant and for any amendment to a zoning bylaw on the floor of town meeting because of, you know, unintended consequences. But, you know, there have been very, I can't think of any time there's been an amendment on the floor of town meeting that a planning board has, you know, I'm going to say, told town meeting, yes, that's a great thing, because of the time and effort that the board spends on, you know, researching these things. So there have been zoning bylaws amendments where I guess the board kind of thinks about a fallback position. Should somebody present something, you at least have, you know, done a little bit of the research to say, okay,
Like your incremental
yeah,
tables basically.
yeah,
you use.
if town meet, because you can't go lower but, you know, you can go higher, you know.
So, Elizabeth, just on your point about the data, like, it sounds like you and Kate went through some database together to pull out, like, for your couple of case study slides, Kate, that you did a while ago, right, where you had like, this is a tear down and this was what was around it. Like, you pulled that out of a specific database. Is that right?
Yeah, so the admin assistant for the building inspections division keeps a database of every new home. And, you know, if there's an existing home, you know, the existing home, and it has square footages, right, does it? I think Tracy's database.
For the new homes, that
Yeah.
had square footage for the new homes, but not the homes that were torn down.
Yes.
Oh, really? That's what it's
So it's a record that the admin assistant in the building inspection division keeps. But there is some research on the, you know, the square footage of the tear down.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that it's like, we definitely have the before and after, but just in the, like, Kate, you had that one slide in this deck of like, okay, this was the tear down and here are all the neighboring houses and and they're far. Like, where did that data come from?
That comes from the
Seymour.
assessors.
Exactly.
Yeah, it comes
Yeah,
from the
so-
assessors data.
And specifically, what I did was, you can go through Concord GIS, which everyone has access to, and select that parcel, and you can access the current assessor's card and see
Oh.
how many houses.
And
So
which
I did that
basically has the,
manually for that slide.
okay. Okay, yeah, so just my point is like, yeah, it sounds like a hard laborious process, but like the data exists that if somebody spent like a day or whatever, you could click on like however many parcels you wanted and collect the data to understand like what is the character from a far perspective in any, you know, given neighborhood today. Just to the point of like, well, what is reasonable? Why is it reasonable to set it lower? Well, because I mean, in my mind, it's because that's what the existing character is today. And so we need the data behind that.
kind of further to do like a larger maybe study of what you did if you want to support it, not you necessarily, but could be done.
Yeah, it could be done.
I always thought of that more as a like a neighborhood preservation district thing, but because I don't know that we want to set it based on what's around it. I think we want thresholds that are going to apply across the board, based on lot size, not based on existing neighborhood character.
I think, Haley, you're just trying to say that it's just another way to support, like if somebody says, well, I think we're gonna end up with homes that are too small, then this is another way to kind of support. Well, actually, the homes, you know, that have been there for so long are, you know, in that realm, so it's not, and they weren't too small before, why are they too small now when we have actually fewer people in each home?
Because it doesn't look like a neighborhood that's mostly flipped.
Exactly.
Then you are
Oh.
getting an answer.
Absolutely.
Adverse argument against it.
That's what the ZBA has been facing, is that
Yes.
people are coming to them and saying, we want to expand more than 50%. And all of our neighbors have already
Already
done it.
done it, right.
But they're on a non-conforming lot, so yeah, so we have to, but I mean, still, it goes to show you if we can find, you know, enough lots, and that's why you went to that neighborhood first, because you could find homes that haven't been turned in.
But yeah, I mean, theoretically, if you could do that through GIS, I guess you could, it would be possible, but, yeah, I don't know. But then you have to define like what a neighborhood is, like the bounds of different neighborhoods that you want to look at. So I think this is more controversial, like I think it's really riding the line in terms of the impact. But I think I'm pleased that it seems like it's getting in the right direction.
Well, the people that come and for public comment, we continue to hear the same thing, right? So those people should be at town meeting, but furthermore, like we're continuing to move towards our long range plan and sustainability and lower impact and you know, less you know, impact to the land. So it does seem like what we're presenting is supporting both what we're hearing from the public, but also goals of the long range plan.
So first off, thank you for putting that
Okay.
all together. So you actually mentioned something that I hadn't thought of, and that was the unintended consequences if somebody does a floor amendment. And that's the impact that would have on whatever we, assuming we put forward a sustainable FAR amendment along with that. Do we then try to have that scale along with it? And which comes back to sort of my original concern is that in doing them at the same time, especially if like you showed in your example where basically 107 homes that were built in that 5-year period would get caught up in the proposed new standard FAR. Out of 130, 133. To me, I'm not the AG. That's a substantial, like, they could do a data analytic, review like that, and that would be a substantial change to what would otherwise have been. And then your argument in doing all that is, we don't want mansionization. We think places are getting too big, et cetera, which is fine. But at the same time, you're going to make the argument, but you could have big as long as it meets this other criteria. You add in all these other things. To me, that sort of undermines our argument because we're saying that we don't want big bulk. We don't want to see big bulk. And that's why we need to get to the standard FAR. But we'll accept big bulk or bigger bulk if you meet the certain sustainability criteria. I think it would be a safer move to do the one first, because we can make the argument that there's a long history within the town and large support for lowering the FAR as a mechanism to deal with nationalization. And in some regards, lowering the FAR and having smaller builds is itself a greener and more sustainable build. Then you come back and you say, okay, we've done this and we also want to add on these. I worry that doing them together is just going to have the wrong look because the AG will know the context. It's not as if
I'm less worried about the AG, and that is an interesting point. And I guess the other thing is that in doing some other research, it does seem like the building code is going to address more of the sustainability issues when we get to the point where they adopt the kind of the further stretch code, and it will address both solar ready and EV from a building code perspective without even getting into zoning.
Yeah, but it's going to take a long time.
Take that long. It can't.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Like the code might be in place by the end of next year, and it's going to decline at some lazy rate like it always does until like 2028, where it might be finally useful.
But I think market drivers are going to drive people to build all electric. Incentives are coming anyway for builders and homeowners. And I think the market is going to drive people to do more all electric and, other more sustainable builds.
We're in an MLP though. MLPs are slow.
I'm also nervous about adding the two together along the lines that Nathan iterated, because part of what we've got is when you have two standards, you now have two standards that can be attacked. You can also, from the AG's perspective, saying, oh, well, the FAR is too broad. Well, that's one thing. Okay, the incentives are wrong. That's another way. Oh, these shouldn't be connected. That's a third way. All of a sudden, as you make this more complicated and try to put more pieces together, it just creates more avenues where if you have a tool that you can use to regulate a specific problem, we should use that tool, and then we can chip away at it later, or someone else can chip away at it later, saying, okay, here's a standalone green thing that can stand or fall on its own merits and not take the rest of the mansionization issue with it, because the worst case scenario is you lose 3 years of having to kind of thing.
So I understand. I understand everybody's position, and they all have definite merits. My only my opinion is that it would be fairly simple, other than putting together a presentation, to move forward with just amending the current FAR. You could have that on town meeting for April, May, whatever it is, 2022. You could do that. You could not develop a warrant article that included the sustainable side within the next 2.5 months, solely because, you know, I did have a chance to speak with the building commissioner. And so somebody's required, when you submit for a building permit, they have their, you know, their HERS, projected HERS rating. His comment, and so they just were, now we're able to get the sustainable FAR. What, you know, what it happens and what is their enforcement requirement, and what do they do if they come back and they have their as-built HERS rating, and instead of it being 40, it's 42. So then, you know, how does the building inspection division and town staff deal with that? You know, no fossil fuel hookups, you know, maybe, you know, just for cooking. 15, and so now they just got the sustainable FAR. 20 years from now, you only have to file for a plumbing permit
Run gas.
to run gas and put, you know, and put a gas furnace in your house. Or, so, you know, again, then it becomes, you know, how does the, you know, enforcement of that, when somebody's already built something, they got to be a little bit bigger, and it's significant. It's not like, it's not something that you can, you know, basically take away. You know, it's somebody's house. So those are still those implementation issues and enforcement issues that every zoning bylaw that the planning board puts forth, that's, you know, that is a very real and significant component for any new zoning bylaw is, you know, the enforcement side of it, and, you know, or staff time. And I understand it's okay, well then, you know, let's hire another, you know, inspector or another planner. But even then it's okay, well then it's, you know, select board, personnel board, finance committee, job description, HR. So it's not that simple in the whole, you know, grand big scheme of how town government works. So that would be one of the primary reasons that I agree. You have the data and the information to say, yes, we think lowering the FAR is, you know, something that the town should do. And that would be my opinion on that topic.
It's very convincing, especially with the, how hard it's been to get to this point with just like the standard build, thinking of having to like go through this process again is very convincing. The one thing that I don't think I've said clearly is there's sort of a takings issue here, because we are potentially impacting people's property values. And if we have it paired with an incentive, it ameliorates the taking issue, because it's our position that building green is cost effective. So you can still build just as much, we're just forcing you to build green. So it takes away the teeth of that problem, I think. So, and I think that's important. So I just wanted to say that.
The taking issue is not established through somebody's rate of return.
Okay.
There's no taking issue with somebody apparently, you know, feeling that, you know,
I could have gotten more.
I could have gotten more.
Right, okay.
The town assessor, or the previous town assessor, we don't currently have a town assessor.
Oh.
You know, the question came up with somebody saying, a daycare next to my property is going to lower my property values. The town assessor said there's no evidence in New England, there may be, there's no evidence in New England that actually happens. And he says, other than, there's only a couple of couple of instances in Concord, is there ever going to be some type of very intrusive, noxious use next to a property in Concord that might lower the value. And takings also deals with, there's some takings is when somebody has no reasonable expectation to be able to develop something. It has nothing to do with how much somebody thinks their property can sell for. That's not entered into the takings issue. So if the board can make the factual, the factual case for reducing the FAR, and it passes so really is kind of a subjective reasonableness.
I don't know that you're calling it factual, but I mean, it's great that Kristen found a hook, but I don't know if saying, well, this is the average size of house in New England means of what size that people in Concord should be allowed to build based on the historical, land use in Concord. So I'm just not sure if that's very strong.
But even, I think in your slide, I think you have one of sort of the average historical size. I don't think it was that different from.
But the historical size, I mean, there's no factual basis for saying that we can only build what the historic size was, right?
No, but if your argument for going against nationalization is that it's taking away from the town character, and the character is based on the houses that exist.
Yeah.
So it is sort of related to that. I mean, you're right. You're not telling somebody the lot currently has a 1,800 square foot house. Now you can only build an 1,800 square foot house. But you're saying, you're trying to keep it within scale and scope of what is existing in the town.
And it's reasonable. Like, I mean, I think that what those numbers say is what we're proposing are not unreasonable sized houses for people to live in.
Right.
Families of all sizes.
But I don't think that we get to make that judgment. Like, I don't think that's the way property rights.
But I think it is. I think that's what zoning is.
That's the exercise. We're basically saying, okay, we've looked at the numbers and we think that this is appropriate. And that's the best, that's what they did 5 years ago. And it turns out it was a little bit wrong. So all we're doing is
That's not true. That's not what they did 5 years ago. It turns out that was wrong. That what they did 5 years ago was they decided what they wanted to address, and they were also trying to establish an FAR, which was going to be difficult. That's why they set it at that level, and it was effective for doing what they wanted it to do. And
Right,
now
and
we're
we're
coming
taking-
through, and we're trying to take a much more substantive bite out of it. And it seems controversial to me. But of course, I've developed this whole thing.
It may be, but
But it's controversial to the developers who are buying the houses that you saw for
And the people
$600,000 and people are selling.
and to people who seek
And the
dollar
people that are
signs.
selling their properties to the developers.
But at the same time, there's however many thousands of residents in town with 17,000 that you're talking about 100 houses. You're not talking about 50% of the housing stock. You're not talking about every single house that's getting turned over to a new family. You're talking about a limited number of tear downs, which are dramatically affecting these neighborhoods.
Oh,
And-
that's actually interesting.
And so
We're
that's, because this isn't
impacting
impacting people who are putting on a master bedroom, right?
Well, the people in different mansions were probably moving from different towns anyway. We're trying to represent.
So
the people
anyway,
in Concord.
I think I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and look at, because I think that there is a legal question here. So I don't know, is it something we always get to that point every meeting where it's like, how do we talk to town council? I mean,
yeah, no.
It's also worth pointing out that it's not as if a developer comes in and you have your home for sale for 600,000, and in the current market that would probably go for like 650 or something like that. They come in and say, a million because I'm going to build a 1.7 million. They're savvy, they know what the values are, so they're also gonna be in that 650, 660 range. So you're talking about a difference of really in a sale price, it's gonna be $10,000. It's gonna be really negligible because they're not trying to lose money, they're trying to get a piece of property for, the best price they possibly can.
So,
And there's a solid argument that it actually makes the houses in the neighborhood more valuable because people are sitting there saying that, okay, I'm buying into this neighborhood. It's going to look like this next year. It's not going to be a neighborhood where half the houses are going to be construction sites and, all this stuff that people don't like about these kind of developments. And I think it's just the idea is that you guys have put together some really solid numbers of justifications for why the limits are reasonable in the sense that, instead of putting, I think it was Lexington's number had like a 4,200 square foot floor, like any lot could put 4,200 or whatever the number was. But obviously we're not trying to look at that kind of scale. So to have it more sliding and appropriate, they're building as you get into different size lots, the house sizes increase by about 500 square foot, just as a matter of what's being built today. The new standard you put in has that same kind of cap limit. The cap limit grows a little bit as the lots get bigger. It seems reasonable.
The table is really effective. And I think having, like you said, having some others sort of in our back pocket, should there be a floor amendment, that we would be willing to sort of.
How could anybody, do you know how much work?
no,
How could anybody
They
ask for a
can.
floor amendment?
No,
You
you
would
know-
have no idea what they would do. Like,
because I can tell you what will happen.
yeah, tell me.
Somebody will just play with this
Oh.
number right here. And they'll change
What
it.
if we did
But
that?
how could they assure people that they know what the impact of that is going to be?
Well,
Like,
and
but
that's
it-
one of
but
the
it-
things
it-
we could respond to.
But it won't matter. It won't matter. Somebody will say, okay, well, I have a 20,000 square foot lot.
Yeah.
But I want a 3,200 square foot. So I'm gonna propose.
Well,
to
I dare
just-
them to try to do that when I'm at the town meeting.
Oh, no, that's
I'm like,
So I'm just saying that's just,
how some things work.
Yeah.
that is
understand,
gonna be how it's going,
and I
if
think
it were to
we have
happen.
a step before that too, which is to go into public comment with this and have some of our public comment sessions.
Yeah.
So we'll have another, what were you gonna
I
say?
mean, I don't think we should we should plan ahead, but we also shouldn't just talk ourselves out of it because it's not going to be easy. So I think we're all agreement here that from everybody I've heard of so far, that most of us are like on board with this. So we can strategize around all the potential ways this will fail or go poorly. But like, I don't think that means we should just give up.
Well, I do think it means though, it might be maybe something we can pass, see if, our expensive friends did offer, as we develop it, if we wanted to pass something by them. So do you think we're at that point now?
I feel like we should have a little more research.
Our town council.
oh,
I have a question, and I just wonder how this might influence all the hard work that's gone into getting approval for accessory dwelling units and duplexes. I mean, would they fall under this constraint? And do we have any information about, whether we would be making it more difficult to see those programs develop?
so it would, that same floor area ratio, which deals with total, lot, basically lot coverage, for anything that's over, not on a permanent foundation and over 100 square feet, it does go into that factor. So, but I think that's definitely, that's probably definitely something to think about when, but if somebody, yeah, so that's definitely something to think about. So, an accessory dwelling unit, by right is 750 square feet. So, does this number get slightly tinkered to, raise these a little bit to allow for that buffer? So I think so far we've had four or five two-family dwellings under the new, four or five. I just, off the top of my head, I don't know what their square footages are. But I know at least two, maybe three are in a resident C zone district. So I'll get that information and we can see how it fits in to this table. And that might be helpful to look at, adjusting those, that calculation.
Great, thanks, Linda. All right, well, this feels like progress then.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Yeah.
a lot of work that you.
Yeah.
So for next steps, I'll get that two-family data. And then it sounds like at this point, the board wants to, at least move forward in the next few meetings to see if it's going to be just a warrant article for next town meeting, just to change the FAR. So it may be just getting this additional data to tweak this. And then the board can have a conversation at the next meeting.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to discussion around the Thoreau Depot Business District. Oh, do we need that?
No.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Public comment.
I don't know.
There. Yes, that's a
Oh,
good
yeah,
point. Thank
that's
you.
Yeah.
Back up. Yes, sorry. Is there any public comment for the prior conversation regarding floor area ratio?
I have a quick comment. This is Joe Stein, 21 Thoreau Street. I'll just be brief. I thought that was a great discussion, actually. I'm not entirely sure that a sustainable FAR is a good idea, actually. I do think it would make sense to treat this incentives and the amended FAR as kind of a separate issue. I just think it's just going to confuse the messaging in town meeting, and it's going to be hard to pass. And I think defining a sustainability threshold is going to be subjective, and you'll get a lot of questions there.
Joe, can you speak up?
Oh,
Thank you. We could hear you, but it was hard to hear you. So go ahead.
okay. So I'll just be really brief. So I don't think a sustainable FAR is gonna kind of deliver the intended impact. I do think we should think about treating them separately. I just think it's going to confuse the messaging in town meeting. I mean, you're starting with a set of assumptions that are being used to amend the existing FAR, and then you're going to add another set of assumptions for a sustainable FAR, and so it's just going to make people's heads spin. I think the sustainability threshold is also very subjective, and I think you'll get a lot of questions there. So, why this, why not that? And I think the point was also raised that increasing the size for sustainable buildings is kind of hypocritical a little bit. And then just the last point, and this was already brought up, but it's going to create an obvious loophole for developers. And so I just think that, great conversation. I'm not entirely sure a sustainable FAR is a good idea at this point. I mean, it would be much cleaner in my mind to implement this sort of stuff through other means, like, reduction in taxes or whatever. So anyway, that's just my quick comment. Thanks.
Seeing no other raised hands, and I think is that everybody that's on?
Yes.
All right. And we will move on to the Thoreau Depot Business District discussion. Slides.
So I did have a chance to speak to the building commissioner about the height issue and the conversation that the board had last time about how height is measured differently in the commercial districts. And to basically help the board think about, so currently the zoning bylaw for commercial districts, it's the height is 35 feet to the top of a flat roof or to the mean between the plate and the peak of a pitched roof. So he provided a couple of examples to put things in context as you think about a 35-foot flat roof building, and the potential for that is significantly different than a 35-foot if you were to go to the peak of a pitched roof. You would not, it wouldn't be the same as far as how it works in what is allowed. And so I'm gonna show you a couple examples. And he sent this to me as an email. Okay, so I've attached my rudimentary sketch of two 60-foot wide buildings and 3 stories. The first sketch shows the roof constructed with an 8 pitch, and the second sketch shows a roof constructed with a 10 pitch. Both examples meet the current maximum height of 35 feet to the midpoint between the plate and the ridge. And then he also reviewed the architectural elevations for Concord Crossing, for 10 Concord Crossing, which is the one right along Sudbury Road, and then 30 Concord Crossing, which is the mixed-use building in the back. 10 Concord Crossing has a ridge height of approximately 36 feet, and 30 Concord Crossing has a ridge height of approximately 42 feet. So everybody looks at 30 Concord Crossing, and that, beats as far as where it's positioned on the lot, as far as its scale and again, the design guidelines get into actual, architecture, but the height of that, it's first floor commercial, second floor residential, and then the third floor is actually dormered, but it's residential, but it's not, a solid face, which if it was a flat roof building, you would have a much more, a building that has significant more bulk as far as how it's, how it looks with a flat roof. And I don't think they're, even at the the forum where the visualization forum, there was support for what Concord Crossing looks like. And I don't think anybody realizes that it's 42 feet to the peak. So let me show you, his sketches. Yes. Okay. They're. Oh, what? What? Okay, I'm going to try that again.
Well, did he sketch 10 Concord Crossing? Like, was that one of them?
So I can't for for some reason, it doesn't want to share now. So
But I think the important part is that
anyways,
we
I will
have an
tell you.
existing building that,
And we have these on December 14th.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I just got them late this afternoon.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea of, and it really doesn't have to do with the, the size of the building as far as height. It has to do with the width of the building and what type of pitch roof you can have. So the two sketches he provided, he took a 60 foot, wide building. The first floor at 12 feet, second floor at 10 feet, and then with a pitched roof, a third floor with an 812 pitch roof. The midpoint is 32 feet. The peak is 42 feet. And that's what Concord Crossing is at. He took the same 60 foot wide building, 12 feet first floor, 10 feet second floor, and did a 10 pitch roof, which is much taller and steeper. The midpoint would be 35 feet and the peak would be 47 feet. So his recommendation is that the height calculation be to the peak, but that there needs to be a difference between a flat roof height and a pitched roof height. If your goal is to have a building like Concord Crossing. So I have no idea why I can't share my screen anymore. So I will provide those for next time. I will be able to talk with him a little bit more and come up with some suggestions on how he thinks, that the language for dealing with height could be, written in the bylaw so that you're talking about building similar to Concord Crossing. Okay.
That's so helpful.
And then, but I'll get these up on the website tomorrow. I might actually have him darken them up a little because he sketched them out pretty quickly. But there was something else. He sent me a text at 6:30. He did another. The sketches he did for 60 feet. He used 60 feet because that's how wide 13B Commonwealth Avenue is. So that's 3 stories, 35 feet. No, actually 40 feet. They got a waiver to go up to 40 feet to allow 3 stories. So that's why his sketch, he picked 60 feet wide. So, people had something to visualize. And then so let me see. So that the 13B Commonwealth Ave, that building has a flat roof. So it's at 40 feet. So I did the calculation for a 40 foot wide building with a 10 pitch, and the ridge height would be 38 feet and the midpoint would be 30. So his recommendation is if the planning board wants to, address this issue of height between, a flat roof and then a pitched roof that allows something similar to Concord Crossing, that it should be, the height measurement should be to the ridge. And for a pitched roof, it's somewhere between 38 and 42 feet to the ridge for something similar to Concord Crossing. And the attached.
So Elizabeth, that means that with the current zoning requirements, people could put up a 3-story building.
With the current zoning requirements,
Of 35 feet, they could still construct a 3-story building. So we don't need to go to 38. Except if we want flat roofs to go up to
So-
38.
so under the current zoning, it's not so much the height limit of 35 feet. I mean, 35 feet for a flat roof is 35 feet for a flat roof. It's how height is measured in the commercial district when you have a pitched roof. So you change the pitch. You could be at, you could have a building that's, the peak is at 47 feet and with a 10 pitched roof, which, you know,
That's why the sketch is helpful.
Yeah.
An A-frame, you just go crazy.
yeah, you know, you would still meet the 35-foot height. And I don't think as the board is thinking about these mixed-use buildings, they're thinking about Concord Crossing, and which is at 42 feet. They're not thinking of, you know, 47 feet. So I do think there needs to be some different height between a flat roof and a pitched roof and have it go to the peak. And if I had to think about the visualization forum and the support for, something like Concord Crossing, and even 13B Commonwealth Ave, I mean, that went to 40 feet, and it allowed for different, different design considerations with the first floor commercial and the 2 floors of residential. There's significant support for 40 feet. It wasn't, that extra 5 feet when you were looking at the design considerations of, because it met the West Concord design guidelines of, setting back portions and having, visual differences. And so, that 5 feet did not become an issue because of those design guidelines.
So for the Thoreau Business District, were we gonna have the design guidelines where we wanted the pitched roofs, you would still be able to build something with a flat roof, right?
Correct.
It's just that the design guidelines would try to encourage pitched roofs.
I don't necessarily think the design guides, move everybody to have a pitched roof, because like on Thoreau Street, you have the flat roofs because you don't have that space, like you do on, some of the lots on Sudbury Road. And so, they have historically, and like Commonwealth Ave, historically is flat roofs because, you're right at the street, you're trying to maximize, your little space. I think, so for flat roofs, I think the design guidelines will help with that, that massing by, as far as the glazing and the vertical and horizontal. Think of the word.
Variation.
Yeah, variations.
Okay, so what you're saying is we just have to make sure that we specify how height will be measured. Does that, but isn't height measured in the same way throughout the bylaw, or is how height measured in different, depending on?
For heights measured in the commercial and industrial districts, it's that for, to the peak of a flat roof and the mean.
So how
between
would we distinguish it in this?
So
We
how
lead
you
by the number.
Well, so how the bylaws, gets structured is you have the new column, and the, for that, for Thoreau Business District, you see the new section 7, I think it's 711. And the dimensional requirements are in there. So it would specifically say how that works in the bylaw.
So we would have a different set for.
Yes. Which for the implementation and enforcement side, going to the peak is much easier than, this. And so that was something that a good example is the Concord Children's Center. When they were finalizing going through the Zoning Board of Appeals, they had an elevation error, and the building was, I think, like a foot, like it was 36 feet instead of 35 feet. So all they had to do was change the pitch of the roof slightly and get, and get it down. So that's the conversation on height.
Great, then you're gonna come back with recommendations on.
Yeah, I'll get the drawings up on, get them a little darker, get them up on the website tomorrow. Have a better conversation with the building commissioner as far as, the wording and come up with, a draft of, after speaking with him, a draft that, might work based on his recommendation and his drawings and the examples of 13B Ave and Concord Crossing.
So related to that, MECC with all their drawings that they've done, could we just add dimensions to those? I mean, they obviously drew them to scale, and so maybe if we added dimensions, those could be other visual
They did it for the
representations.
sidewalks.
Yeah.
So they could just have.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I think I'll have to check. I think those graphics were done to the peak. So
And you would have had to do that for the shadow analysis too.
Right, but which means the buildings could be taller.
they would be, yes, they
Right.
would be slightly taller.
So,
So I think that's why he did it to 38 feet for the pitched roofs to the peak. So if you're looking at Concord Crossing, that's a slightly, higher, by 4 feet.
yeah, I'm just thinking, even if we could kind of put them next to each other, so like, this is a building you actually walk by and you see, and now you know what we're proposing is, relation to that. Because that's a lot of the questions that we're getting, from folks about building height and stuff. So everything that we can show in real life as well as next to each other and drawings, I think is helpful.
Yeah, let's see if it works. It just doesn't. So going through a couple of the comments that came up at the last meeting. One dealt with the discussion of professional offices on the first floor and including a provision similar to what the West Concord Village has, where the current West Concord Village also excludes, there's no R&D or light manufacturing, which is a no presently for Thoreau Depot. So the language would be that no lodge, club, or professional office permitted on the first floor in the Thoreau district. So that was just something that wasn't discussed at the last meeting. Burton, planning board chair, and I did last Wednesday go to the Concord Business Partnership meeting. And the chair goes to a meeting somewhere around November and tells them it's business owners and property owners throughout in Concord that attend. There's probably 20 people, 25 people there. Burton, discussed the Thoreau Depot, and then something else in your agenda that you'll get to, and the topic of not having professional offices on the first floor came up, and currently Concord Center and the number of professional offices and, or real estate offices that are within, Concord Center. And there was, there was actually, some property owners who actually, do own property in Thoreau Depot, and would be considered a professional office. We're in support of that because they live near Concord Center. They walk it, and just that vitality, isn't there when you have a professional, office. People don't go into Main Street Cafe and then, if a lawyer's office was on the first floor, it's, that's not adding to, that walk of that vitality in the community. So it was something that wasn't discussed previously, so I just put that in there as a discussion item.
Did you say a real estate agency would be a professional office?
That is
It is.
defined as a
Oh,
professional
yeah.
office.
Oh, okay.
So if, and so that's currently not in Concord Center zoning.
And, no,
The
I mean, it's
restriction
currently
is-
The
allowed.
restriction is currently allowed, the restriction's not.
I've noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
No, and we definitely had the conversation during the last meeting about sort of the value add or lack thereof of having an overwhelming amount of them in one particular center results in. So I think it's a good addition here, and I know we were also discussing whether that might be something we look into as an add-on to the formula business bylaw, but that's a separate conversation.
so at this point, so I took out the formula business bylaw and actually made that just a separate warrant article, because I think
Right.
there was just support,
Yep.
whether this moves forward or not, there was just,
Yep.
support for, having, having that village included with Concord Center and West Concord Village and Business District.
I have a question. Oh,
Nope, go
hello.
ahead.
Yep.
Just regard to that whole issue of professional offices, we have a yes on educational, and I guess that would be like the tutoring kind of,
No, so educational is a protected status under the zoning act. And it is actually a defined, use. Somebody who does tutoring, that's a business. That's not classified as an educational use. That's a business.
so that would fall under professional office? Or what would it fall under as a business use?
Yeah, I would say would probably fall under a professional office. I'll have to ask the building commissioner is the one that makes that final determination.
Okay, thank you.
So did you want the definition of educational use? It has to be land owned or leased by the Commonwealth or its agencies or political bodies or a recognized religious sect or a nonprofit educational entity. And it includes athletic fields, dormitories, administrative offices, and so that's different than a business of a tutor.
Thank you.
I'm surprised I can read my writing sometimes. So this is where in, as far as the height, Christian, you had asked, this is where it just says, see section 711. So the first Okay, so the first comment, I don't know how to. Can everybody online see my comment box, the whole thing? Linda, you can?
Yes, okay,
Okay,
I have it up.
so
Mhm.
I wasn't, so the proposal includes changing the parking requirements for a combined business residence. And whether the board wanted to have that be for all combined business residents or only the Thoreau Depot Business District. So currently, the requirement is so currently, the requirement is whatever the commercial use is, there's the parking requirements and the requirements for parking for that use. And then it's 2 parking spaces per residential unit. Doesn't matter whether it's a studio or a 5-bedroom. It's 2 parking spaces. So the question is whether the board wants this parking ratio, which is one that MAPC, through all of the different research that they have done of existing mixed use projects in not like Cambridge, that they have found is like 1.25 parking spaces per residential unit. But in the more suburban communities, it's 1 to 1.5. And so this is where that ratio came up. So whether the board wants to consider having this be for all combined business residents, or whether you just want to, at this point, just leave it for Thoreau Depot. So that's just something to think about. I'm trying to be.
We still need to redo our parking, but I don't think we're gonna get to it for this
No.
seat right here. So that being said, I think we do need to leave something in for this one for now.
But you think for across the board, not just for Thoreau Depot?
Oh, well, I mean, no, I kind of think we should just leave it for Thoreau Depot, because I think we need to overhaul everything and for parking.
I don't think it's a significant issue not having it be for everything, because the current combined business residence provision that would be for the rest of the town, there is a waiver provision, so they can go through the special permit process with the Board of Appeals to waive or get a reduction in the required parking, if certain things are, addressed. So I don't think it's critical that this go beyond the Thoreau Depot. Oh, okay.
So in,
I can't go there right now.
in table 4 minimum parking, there is already a combined business or a combined business residence in the parking table?
No,
Okay,
no,
So-
it's 2 spaces per residential unit and whatever the,
okay. So combined business residence, is that defined somewhere?
yes.
All right, so then by defining, by specifying parking in this part of the zoning bylaw means it only applies to this.
No, this would have to specifically say
Yeah,
combined
okay.
business residence in
Yeah,
the
okay,
Thoreau
thank you.
Depot.
All right.
And we already
So
talked about.
one question before we move on from that, is the concern in not sort of expanding that currently to the other mixed use applications that, because I'm thinking if we're going to go back and address parking, we would potentially be addressing this one thing that we're doing for Thoreau Depot anyway.
In addition to, right?
So
And I
it's
guess
like
I
it's the
have-
same amount of work either way. to
Yeah, I
me,
guess I don't, it's not that I have concerns about applying it, but I just wonder if, because there's still so much to do on this bylaw, that I wonder if we're gonna dilute our attention and not be able to get to everything, that's all.
I agree.
Even just considering, okay, well, how would this
Yeah.
apply? in
I was
my-
also, I mean, my initial thought when I was up there was, no, let's keep it to Thoreau Depot, just because I don't want to like
Yeah.
get people distracted with things outside of that district. So
I agree.
I guess I will stick, I'll stick with you and I'll say, let's keep it only to Thoreau.
Well, yeah, we want to focus because there's so many things in here. We want
Yes.
people to understand that.
Yes.
So the other item dealt with the affordability and density. And so what added, having the density requirement in there. And then as far as, because I know Kate had the questions regarding the MBTA communities. I did speak with the I think her title's director at DHCD, and so they are moving forward. They hope to have at least some type of draft guidelines by the end of the year, and then it's a public comment period, and but that public comment period and community and town input, regional planning agency input, that will definitely be past February 2nd and closing of the warrant. So so she couldn't give me any definitive answer on they're currently looking at especially as far as density, how that gets measured, because density is different for Cambridge to a suburban community. So that's currently what they're working on. And how that density gets, that the 15 units per acre won't change, but it's, whether it's, vertical or horizontal, or, how that gets measured is what they're kind of currently struggling with, because it's not the same for a city as it is for a suburban community. But because the law says 15 units per acre, that will at least be, that standard will still be there. It's how are they going to evaluate and measure that standard is what they're currently tackling with. So, so whether the board wants to just put that standard in there right now, whether it's a maximum, or whether to leave that out, and let development basically, you have a lot, and you have all of these requirements, and somebody has to take all those requirements and put it together to make a proposal. So you can have the bylaw, you can have the design guidelines, you can have the vision, and even the examples that MAPC has put together. Even the examples, more than likely are not realistic of what a development is ultimately going to be, including the build-out analysis. The build-out analysis doesn't take into consideration setbacks. It doesn't take into consideration the shape of the lot. It doesn't take into consideration how you put together the building and the parking. Well, the parking is based on the uses. The build out analysis doesn't take into consideration that you have this use that only requires 1 space per 1,000, or this use, which is 1 space per 250. So that's what a build out analysis gives you, is just this approximation, but more than likely it's less than that, because somebody's going to have to take all of these requirements, put it together, and somehow make it work, along with the open space and the pedestrian sidewalk and all of these different elements that go into a project. So I think having a project where you just have shall not exceed 15 units acre takes away from that ability to develop a project that can, fit with a site, and be able to, flow with all of these requirements when they come together. So, I mean, I put it in there for the board to discuss. I don't think a maximum density is needed when you're talking about a combined business residence that has the dimensional requirements and the design guidelines and the open space and the parking. Because you will get somebody trying to meet that one aspect and not looking at the project and how a project can flow and be, developed on a site based on the characteristics of the site and what the community wants. I think if somebody starts focusing on, well, if that's my maximum, that's what I'm going to try and go for. And I'm going to try and cram that in.
I don't understand what residential density is. Like, if you were gonna measure residential density within the Throw Depot district, would you just take the entire area of the district and then try to count the number of units that are there now and just take, or like how do you measure it? Like, which acre are you talking about? Like, which acre are you talking about that you can't have 50? You know what I mean? Or you're just saying on an individual property? You measure on the property.
No, it's if a property is, 2 acres, somebody could, under the, current, state provision, it would be, 30 units.
30 units total of any, combining both the residential and the business.
No,
units.
like what,
Just
30
residential.
Just residential.
Okay, so you're just looking at that property in isolation. You're not looking at the density of the district.
No,
Oh, no, okay.
no, that provision on, that new provision under the zoning act, it doesn't.
That's
it's-
different.
Oh, so for this density, no, that would just be for if somebody were to propose a combined business residence, the, 15 unit per acre maximum density would just be based on, whatever that project is. Yeah. So somebody, so like Crosby's Market, they have one lot. They may, work with there's the 2 little buildings up front. They may work with those property owners to, create, a whole, cohesive redevelopment project, and that acreage would be added into. So I'm going to say it's based on a project. So it's a combined business residence project. And that would be the limiting factor.
So yeah, when you were talking about that, I had the same thought that you ended up explaining, which was that probably don't need it in there. It seems like everything else already defines and confines what you can put in the space for a given project. So the addition of the 15 unit language, I don't know what that adds really, other than, to your point, like, does it then drive people to like, well, if I can do it, I'm going to do 15 then, rather than sort of creatively thinking about how to use that space. So, yeah.
Is it reassuring to people that it can't go above that?
Well, but it doesn't, so, sadly, when the state legislature threw this, 4-sentence paragraph into, the state law, and for some reason just only selected MBTA communities, which doesn't make sense either. It doesn't say, well, 15 units per acre and, there can only be 1,000 square feet. Well, they could be 15 units.
They didn't define what a residential unit is.
No,
Right.
no, it could be 15 units per acre and they could be 2,500 square foot units.
Yeah.
So I think the number itself doesn't provide any, assurance that you're not going to have it, a massive project. I
So another way to think of it is you could have 15, one-bedroom apartments or 15 three-bedroom apartments.
Yeah.
And the 15 is sort of meaningless, but the other guidelines that are in place scale, what is possible really anyway.
Yeah, I
So,
just don't know someone saying, oh, 15. Well, I was thinking it was gonna be 400. And I know that we don't know that that's not possible, but I'm just trying to think what would be the benefit of keeping it, but that's the only thing. I can think
Don't we
of.
have to have something in there that says it's allowed by right?
But I think
Oh,
the zoning
yeah.
act, is a completely different issue, isn't it? Because with the zoning act, they're saying the area that you have as of right zoned, it has to be at least 15 units per acre density. That's way different. than
That's what
this
I
is.
thought we were doing.
But this is completely different. This is, you're saying the density on this property that's being developed is this density. So it's just completely different. right? Maybe it's not working.
Well, not entirely, because you're, ultimately, the Thoreau Depot, business district is only about, what, 23 acres? I'd have to go back and look.
Good question. Is that good? Oh, that's small to you? Doesn't matter. Keep going with your point.
Is that's in on the scheme of things and what the state is thinking about, DHCD, 23 acres is so small. I mean, that is from a commercial district, 23 acres is not a very large commercial district.
But according to who, why is that relevant? Or who, according to, do you think that they're looking for a zone that's much larger?
That's something that they're currently talking about, how do they scale this requirement between like commercial district in Cambridge, which is, like, as far as a commercial district in Cambridge, some of those districts are huge. But you have a commercial district in Air, which is an MBTA community. And I can tell you, the little commercial district of Main Street is not very big. You 15 units per acre, and that little district would be, that would be very challenging. It's, those are narrow lots on that street. And so that's something that they're currently thinking about. What's always fearful in the community, and this is to your point, Kate, is if a maximum, and unfortunately, this is how parking, got established. It's like, oh, well, if we don't, it's the opposite. If we don't put a minimum, then there's not going to be enough parking. And actually that's counterproductive to how actual development and commercial, works. It's, if you don't have enough parking, you're not going to get customers. But if you have too much parking, then it's basically a financial waste and, a sustainability waste and all of those. The same goes for, residential units and that, that fear of if you don't have a maximum, allowed in there, then somebody's going to build 400 units. And that's not realistic, and that's not how it works. There's so many elements of zoning that deal with the development of a property that it's not that one element that's going to define how a project gets developed. It's not just going to be, residential units. It's going to be all of those factors: the parking, the open space, the setbacks, the building height, and so all of
Whatever
those.
maximizes their development, goals.
So once all of those factors get, brought into the development of the project, the potential development is, it's never what, like, the build out analysis MAPC did. It's never as high as that type of build out analysis, because you can't factor in the different shapes of all the lots and how the setbacks are gonna work, or, so I only put it in there because, you know, there's been comments, well, you know, if you don't have a maximum in there, then, you know, somebody's gonna build, you know, 400 units. Well, that isn't realistic. And to Nathan's point, I think when you have a maximum in there, then you're driving people, you know, who want to, you know, propose a project. Well, if that's my limit, then I'm gonna propose 15 you know, units per acre at, you know, 3-bedroom units. When for the community, if somebody did 30 studio and 1-bedroom apartments, as far as that missing middle, or, you know, your college kid, you know, just, you know, graduated, and I heard starting tech jobs are, you know, $105,000, which that's not enough to buy a home, but, you know, could they rent a little studio right by the train station? And, you know, so I think it removes some of the creativity that can, you know, be in that discussion process.
Okay, let's take it out. Are we making?
Well, I
it
want
right
to, I want to ask, I want to ask some of the other board members, what are your thoughts on leaving it or taking it out?
I'm in favor of taking it out. I mean, I think, for example, if you were building a hotel, you know, or a nice boutique hotel, you might want 15 units per acre. I don't know. So it might scare some uses away.
We already have our uses defined though, right?
What a unit is defined as, I don't know.
Yeah, so for a combined business residence, you know, a hotel would not meet the requirement for a residence. So it's either a rental, a residential rental, or ownership unit. So a hotel is, you know, is a business.
Well, it says under resident 4.2 residential units, 4.29 is hotel, extended stay hotel, and motel. Special permit. I don't know.
Sorry if I missed this. Where did the 15 units come from?
So that will be the minimum criteria by right for a MBTA community to meet the new standard in the zoning act. So it was just a starting point for discussion.
So it's a minimum requirement? But here we're saying it shall not exceed. So we're just saying,
We're basically
So-
saying 15 at that point.
So, so in the zoning act, it's a minimum. But in this bylaw, if the board were to present something that said a residential density of a minimum of 15 units per acre, I can tell you this bylaw would not pass. Most people can't think in that direction of minimums. They think in the direction of maximums. This got to the previous conversation of if somebody, most people think, well, if it doesn't say, you know, a maximum number of residential units, then somebody could do 400 units. And that's, you know, as I said previously, that's not, you know, realistic given all of the requirements and the restrictions that go into developing a site. So does that answer your question?
yeah, I think so, but I just want to understand, like, it is the case that the density has to be at least 15 units per acre?
No,
Over the entire district that you want to qualify as being compliant with the act, right? But here you're saying, well, let's just start here because we want to start creating a density on like this property, and that's gonna get us started in the right direction,
I see.
increasing the density on in the district. Is that how it connects back to the end?
Well, I thought it was, so the zoning act is saying there's a minimum.
You have to allow,
Allowable density of 15. That just means that a town that has an MBTA district like that in there cannot set anything below 15. They have to be allowed to build up to 15 units.
Allowable.
It was allowable by right. It has to be allowable by right,
But that doesn't
of a
mean that they,
density of at least 15 units per acre.
but that doesn't mean that the developer must build 15 units. So
Okay.
when my
you just
read
have
of
to
that-
allow it.
yes. So my read of this, by putting that in there, is that the new zoning act says up to 15, and we're saying no more than 15. So really, like you said, it's just another way of, we're capping it at 15. But a developer could build
Which
Five.
I
units
I
per
think,
acre.
yeah, I think capping it at 15 reduces the creativity
Yeah,
of the type of residential
Yes.
units somebody may propose.
yes, I don't want it in there.
I don't, I don't know if I, feel strongly one way or the other about it, but the only thing I did want to suggest here and based on what I see in Northampton and other places and with regard to like density and incentives, like, I haven't seen anything in here yet related to any additions related to sustainability, but, Northampton has certainly done incentive density in specific zones for units over a certain number of units for a development. So that's the only thing I wanted to offer for, again, I'm thinking about like, how do we incorporate sustainability into this?
Just my 2 cents on the density thing. If we're searching for a missing middle, I think taking out a density limit would possibly let you find it. Because if the limit is 15, you're going to get less creative ways and less small units. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be more larger units. So if you're looking for 1 and 2 bedroom units, possibly giving a developer a flexibility of making the building fit the lot as opposed to just maximizing the number of rooms, you're more likely to get what we're looking for. So that's just my thought on the unit question.
Okay. So
Yeah, I mean, are we allowed to specify like the size of the units?
oh, I'm sorry, Haley.
Oh.
See that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was wondering, I mean, are we allowed to specify like the size of the units?
No.
Okay.
You can do it through like a floor area ratio or but I don't think you can just say you can only have 1,000 square foot units or and I apologize, I can't think of the reasons why, and I'll figure that out tomorrow or remind myself tomorrow why you can't do that. But so I'll get back to you on that one, Haley.
Sure, yeah, no worries.
But so to your point, Haley, on the sustainability, that's kind of like a separate issue. And this is where, the board had the conversation about commuter parking incentives. This is where I think it would be, this is where you would put in that same idea of sustainability incentives. So that's why I put that note down there. I was
Okay.
just trying to get through this part. And then there was the whole conversation about affordability. And last night I did, Kate was there, Burton was there. Who else was there? Linda, sorry. Went to the Affordable Housing Roundtable, which includes the new Affordable Housing Trust, Concord Housing Authority, the Concord. How,
Municipal
the
Affordable Housing Trust.
Affordable Housing Trust, the Concord Housing Authority, the Concord Housing Development Corporation, and the Concord,
Housing Fund Foundation.
oh, I can't. Okay, sorry. So we did Burton did give a quick update on this affordable section that the board's discussing for combined business residents. They are going to go back, and so they do have this as one, and along with my notes on this, how do you gauge affordable, and what affordability are we looking for? And they are going to get back to the board before your December 14th public forum on their thoughts and ideas. So it comes down to, currently it just says affordable, but I think it needs to be more defined, similar to the planned residential development. And I think that was in my my agenda memo, which I don't have up, which I can bring up. So it doesn't do that. So that's a conversation. So currently, like the PRD says, if it's one unit, it has to be at the 80%. And then if it's 2 units, one's at 80, one's at 110 to 150% area median income. And then from there, if it goes up, then it's back and forth. It's so that you have an equal mix of different units. And I think that would be something that would be good to implement in this section as well. And there was one comment last night for not having the payment in lieu option, because as we've seen with the Concord Housing Authority's project on Commonwealth Ave, so when that project was first thought of, it was, I think, at $450,000 to build. It is now at $730,000 to build 1 2-bedroom unit. So the comment was made by somebody who's been very active for a very long time as far as affordable housing, that it's better to get the units than just get money. And I do think if you do have this payment in lieu for projects that are 4 or fewer, you're not going to get like the Concord Outfitters type project with, that's just 2 units. It's very expensive to build a combined business resident with just 2 residential units if you're now saying that some percentage of those that cost factor has to be a payment in lieu. So I think it would limit those little small kind of projects. But all of those affordable housing groups said that they will provide comments for the board on this.
Where is payment in lieu allowed now? Like is it allowed under the way it's currently written, or is it somewhere else in the zoning code that like anywhere you need affordable, you can do payment in lieu?
No, I think currently it's only, I think there's only a provision in the, I don't even know if there's a provision in the PRD section.
We need to kind of figure that out.
No, it's come up a couple of times during all of the different discussions.
But how would we
that are being-
formalize it here in this language? Would we say, or is it allowed currently under this language or not
No.
allowed currently? Under this language?
No, it's currently, you don't have to provide an affordable unit for 4 or fewer. And then from 5 to 10, it's 10%.
But in terms of, and is that allowing a payment in lieu instead of doing the 10%?
No,
Okay, so it's currently disallowed.
currently it's not a provision that's allowed
Okay,
yet.
so, and so the comment last night was like, keep it that way.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
And then the last item gets back to the incentives, whether, whether it's commuter parking or whether it's sustainability. And the discussion gets, there's very few things that you can trade off as an incentive, and then it just becomes that discussion. Some people, comments you've received, don't require any affordable, and, if they do all, all electric. Well, I can tell you, there's people in the community that said, yes, sustainability, as far as the design, whether it's stormwater drainage or green space or open space, yes, that's important. But having affordable units and smaller units and allowing people to stay in the community, that's more important. So whenever you talk about an incentive, it's just finding that common compromise ground and what is the level of incentive. So, this is, this isn't final language. This is just thoughts for, the board to think about, and then, how do you go about structuring an incentive? It's got to be either a reduction in something or an increase in density. There's not too many things you can trade off.
Rather than propose an incentive, why don't we prevent the loss of that commuter parking space in the first place?
Because I don't think you can prevent it. If somebody were to redevelop that site, that does not require the, as this original special permit, which is the reason that the commuter parking got proposed in exchange for that special permit. If somebody were to redevelop that site and not require a special permit where that discussion, that negotiation happens, a community can't have in their zoning bylaw that says you have to provide commuter parking. As a private business owner, a private property owner, a community cannot make somebody under zoning require commuter parking. It can be part of a negotiation. It can be part of a special permit. It can be, it can be an incentive. It can be all of those things, but it can't be a requirement.
So under the status quo, we learned that they have to continue to negotiate with us to renew the lease under the status quo. They can't decide in 2024 that they no longer want to provide that project. Right?
As long as those structures sit as they are.
As long as
No,
they want to
that's-
comport with the conditions of the special permit.
As long as that parking, those, I don't know, 20 some spaces up in the corner, are there. It doesn't have to do with the, the building or the density on the site. It's how the zoning line cuts that little bit of corner off, residential and commercial. And at that time when they were developing that site, it made no sense to have, a parking lot that, cut that corner off. Could somebody redevelop the site and cut that corner off and make that corner stormwater drainage? And then redevelop the site and there'd be no commuter parking? Yeah, definitely. They could do that now.
But if they wanted to conform to their existing special permit, they have to keep the parking.
If
Basically, if they want to keep that.
they want to keep that corner, parking in that corner,
Yeah, but I mean, what was I gonna say? You just keep coming back to this point. Because we're talking about incentivizing development of this parcel. So wouldn't it be better not to incentivize development of the parcel? And because now we're having, we're saying in order to keep, like, try to do something about the parking, we're having to compromise on our, considerations with the other things we care about. But like, why are we incentivizing development in the first place if what's there works for us?
Because somebody could come and develop, as she was saying, somebody could redevelop it right now.
But not without like
And
a,
not-
yeah.
But
No, they can do
so-
whatever they want and put like store,
But we're incentivizing them to do that. We're
I-
incentivizing- No, we are. Like, that's why
We're-
but if we do nothing,
no, I
the
understand.
owners of that property could decide that there's a better way to design the property, use the property, and no longer need that corner of parking and use that for stormwater runoff or something like that.
Right, I
If they do
understand
that, then they're under no obligation to negotiate for those 50+ spaces.
But so right now, there's a chance that might happen.
Yes.
And with this, we're increasing the chances that might happen.
We're giving us an ability.
Not necessarily. I see it as the way, sorry, I see it as the way we're looking at it is we're providing guidance and basically dictating a little bit more what we would like to see if that property were redeveloped. Basically saying that, you don't want another strip mall. That's not what would create a walkable community. That's not what would add housing to the area, because we've seen the existing zoning. It's difficult to put housing. It could be all housing, but it can't be a mixed use development. That takes a special permit. So the idea is it's not necessarily pushing it for them to redevelop. They could sit there for 80 years and say, we don't want to, it's free money. But, if they do want to make a change, you want to have the right profile of what they could put in there so that you have a better solution in the future, as opposed to just another strip mall.
So you're saying we're not incentivizing them to develop the parcel?
They can redevelop the parcel right now.
Right, but isn't the whole point of this is to incentivize somebody coming and developing it the way that we want to lay it out here?
We're setting the parameters that we want to see that potential future development may come to look like. And part of that is incentivizing the parking that you want to save for the commuter rail. So we acknowledge that we have no ability to require them to make that parking available for commuter parking. So we're saying, we see that as a value to the community. How can we go about retaining that? Should, a future development change that is no longer a required negotiation with the town because that special permit ceases to exist. We think these are a way to get and retain those 50+ parking spaces.
And also, you're looking at it, at least it seems to be only from the perspective of a willful redevelopment. Someone's coming out here with a plan that they're going to tear this down and they're going to do something. I work in Natick Center, and 2 years ago there was a fire that burned down an entire block. And that now they're talking about what could they build, what should it be, how could the owners all get together and build, but these are all little storefronts that are all non-conforming, that, it creates its own problems. So if we have rules that the rebuilding of, some sort of thing like that would actually be a positive, instead of, great, now they're going to spend all the insurance money to build the same plaza, but now it's all new, so there's no incentive to ever change it. You know what I mean? That's the way I look.
I think so. I hate to see us compromising on these things that we're already worried about losing because of this. So I guess it's hard to know what the trade-offs are because we don't have access to a study that's looking at if we're not, what is the risk of losing this parking? If it's not here, where could it be? Or how much parking do we need? It's really hard to know, how to judge, giving up something.
But there's people in the community that, well, I'm all for there being no commuter parking. That's less traffic coming into town. People get off the train. I see it in there. They don't walk over to a shop and go shopping. They get off the train, they get in their car, and they want to go home. There's people in the community that would be happy not to have commuter parking there and have more people living in the village and walking around in the village. And so they'd be happy if the commuter parking was gone.
If,
So
if,
again, there's different people that think much different things about
So
all
fair
of this.
enough. So those people are now driving into Boston and that's smart growth. That people who were driving to a commuter rail station, taking the train
Oh, I'm
in,
sorry, so you're talking about Concord residents that are driving,
who use
from
the
different
commuter
sites.
rail.
right? And maybe we're gonna have the shuttle that's gonna go around town also.
It's
you're
Yeah,
also talking about 50 commuters, because nobody's sharing a car to park there. So it's 50 people versus potentially hundreds of residents living on site versus people going there on a weekend. I've gone into that shopping plaza recently for, it's in and out. It's not a lifestyle type place where you're going and you're lingering for any period of time. And
Okay, so I've gone there for 12 years and I go there on a weekly basis. And I completely disagree with you. Like I use that for my basic shopping. Like the Girl Scouts sell their cookies outside of that grocery store. Like the sports teams sell their coupons. Open Table has the thing for people to the hardware store, the drugstore. Like I don't see how you can say that. And we're talking about like a new development that's housing and like boutique stuff.
No, we
Oh, we
don't
don't
know.
know.
so you don't know that.
Well, okay, I don't, but like that's what's there now, and I would like to see that stay. And so I always have been like, why are we in such a
That doesn't, currently, that doesn't have to stay there at all. The property owners could, there's a life expectancy to the buildings. At some point, they will come down. And those property owners could redevelop it however they want. So it's 10
Yeah,
o'clock
let me
and
get-
this is
move
a
on.
philosophical question. That obviously the board,
How is it philosophical?
because you're talking about a zoning that to not, to not have incentives for other things when there's other people that feel that those trade-offs and incentives are a good thing. And that's a philosophical discussion on zoning and the conversations that happen when you start to look at amending zoning of this scale. It all comes down to the trade-offs and people, I'm happy with what's there and I don't want it to change. But the realization is currently your zoning allows a property owner rights to develop it based on what you have. And when you go through a zoning change of this level, it's, as Andrew said, you're trying to guide a development that the community would like to see as far as what it looks like and what the uses are allowed in that zone district, the walkability, the residential. But you still can't tell somebody that you have to build a grocery store, you have to have a
I
CVS.
understand that. I understand that.
I think I have another example. If that land was not developed currently, if it was open farmland, whatever, something, and that owner decided to sell it to a developer and their proposal was exactly what is sitting there now, how much of the town do you think would be happy about that layout and setup? I suspect almost none, because it's just not a style and layout that is in keeping with the rest of the town in reality. And it would probably look more like what we're trying to propose here, and is in keeping with things that are surrounding it elsewhere in the depot. And again, that's just one parcel of land within the Thoreau depot that we're talking about. But I don't want people to get hung up on thinking like, I like what's there now, and in terms of the uses that are there, because those same uses might continue to be there. They'll just be developed in a different way that is more in keeping with what we want to see, in terms of the rest of the town and going forward.
All right, well, I guess we shall see.
But I don't know if this answers that question for you.
No,
whether
it-
we want-
it-
whether- whether-
not in my opinion.
It doesn't answer this question, and
Well, I
whether,
mean, it expresses
whether-
my opinion, I hadn't answered that question, which is I don't think we should do that, so, it does answer that question. So you guys, but everyone else. might-
so whether this says commuter parking or whether this is the same for sustainability incentives, I mean, that's a conversation the board has to have.
I think that's one thing that we can bring up when we have the forum. I think that is like, if we were to have some basically written out that said, as an example, commuter parking incentive or a sustainability incentive. And these are the things that we can build in. What is the interest from the community in one or both of these somehow being included in there?
You can have a poll question
Yeah,
of that.
What about the idea that Burton had at the last meeting about pushing the property owner doing, that somehow switching out, like fixing the issue and getting a permanent. In perpetuity lease, whatever it is.
I'll bring it up with Marcia again. She is, it's the contact with the property owner is, historically has been through the town manager's office with the DPLM director providing that context, and she's been here for 32 years. So I'll bring it up again.
as you pointed out, it is past 10 o'clock. Is that the?
So my last, my question, Haley, I don't know if you have some thoughts or ideas on, and I know you're gonna meet with the sustainability director, and I've sent her this information and had a conversation with her. If you're gonna talk with her about some, how this type of incentive for sustainability can be incorporated into this, and if you're gonna work with her to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, definitely happy to. We don't at all need to get into it tonight, but I did come across something that was in the slides that you sent out from Watertown. So I don't know if it's just because it's like it's specific to only a few particular business districts that they were able to implement this, but it's again, it's not even an incentive, it's just a blanket requirement for certain sustainability, as part of site plan review, and in particular zoning districts. It's been passed since 2018 as far as I could tell, so it's been around for a while, but it's in the slides, or it's in one of the slides that was sent around. So, but anyways, that'll just be one of the many things that I'll talk about with, or we'll try to go through with the sustainability director.
So that's not the slide deck that's up on the board's website.
I think it was just the one that I had sent today. I don't know if you posted it all. I didn't really look, but I think you forwarded the slides.
Yeah, I did, but so that's my apologies. I pulled the slide off the website. So do you want me to, I can bring it up real quick if you.
Just given how late it is, I mean, maybe just easiest to wait and we can dedicate more time to it next time around, or after I talk to, what's her name? Is her name Amanda? I forget her name already. The sustainability director. But I just thought that the Watertown was particularly interesting. So again, I don't fully believe it has to be all incentives or nothing. Like, I think we can, my understanding from Northampton and Watertown is like, we can, just say, hey, low impact development is required, or like XYZ is required. But we'll get to the bottom of it.
And I think the difference is, I think those are requirements, if correct me, as part of their site plan process. it might not necessarily be like the zoning district requirement, but a site plan process, which that's the other thing, that's, one of the things is developing site plan rules and regs, which has been on the list. And so I'll look into that a
Could be,
little bit
yeah.
more to see if that's the difference.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and they also had something useful just as a component that they recently added to their design, like overall design guidelines. So that's in there as well.
This site plan rules and regulations don't go to the Attorney General.
And that's what we take care of though, is the site plan review, right? That's
Yeah.
the planning board primarily. And weigh in on.
So I think those other sustainability or like green zoning as it relates to site plan would still be something that the board, could even do now, because you do have that criteria. So I think that's part of the site plan negotiations where it is the, whether it's, low impact development and, other different green zoning as it relates to site specific things not the fossil fuel free or that type of sustainability thing, but there's a lot of different things in that for green zoning and sustainability that go beyond just fossil fuel free. So trees and landscaping and all of those things. So those can definitely be part of site plan rules and regs to meet that aspect of sustainability and green zoning. So I'll take a look at that tomorrow, Haley.
Yeah, I mean, and I know, to date, it's been negotiations because I think the language hasn't been strong enough. But I mean, my understanding from what I'm seeing in Watertown and Northampton is like, they're just saying, this isn't a negotiation, this is what it will be. So.
Right, which is just, Concord hasn't developed, that level yet.
Yeah.
And that change though to site plan, just call it rules and regulations. Does that go to town meeting first?
No, that's just a public hearing for the planning board.
Okay, then yeah, definitely happy to work with Amanda and just understand where it fits in and, making sure it gets addressed somewhere, because I mean, I know the feedback so far we've gotten from members of the public has been along the lines of like, where is sustainability in here? But if we can say, hey, it's going to be covered in site plan review or whatever, then, we just need to have some answer, obviously.
Okay, are we ready to move to public comment?
Can I ask one more question about this?
Yeah, go.
So December 14th is the public forum. So are we gonna talk, like, when will we decide, like, what are we gonna do on December 14th?
Well, it's definitely gonna be at your next meeting, and it was supposed to be tonight, so, so it's probably not happening tonight.
And what does next meeting look like? Do you have other big projects on that, or do you know?
No, there's no big project.
So we can be pretty focused on those.
Yeah.
And that's the only meeting, right? The November 23rd meeting is the only meeting between now and December 14th.
I believe so.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, so, public comment for this topic?
Is that what you said?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Your name and.
Yeah, I'm Steve Newmeyer. I was just wondering.
Your address,
What's that?
Your name and address.
Steve Newmeyer, 61 Belknap Road. I was just wondering how you figure out what the voters want. So I looked at last year's town meeting and I saw the Starbucks issue was voted down. It seemed like 90% against it. And he put some time into proposing something and it failed. So could you forecast that? whether you're surprised by that. So you're going through a lot of time here, and I was wondering, what do you expect to happen at town meeting when people vote on it? And how do you know?
Yeah, so the short answer is you don't know. The example you gave as far as, this was Starbucks, and the proposal was brought forth by the property owner, and, the board got, input, and they presented it, for safety issues. The board got input from the police and fire, and they were in support of it. So, for safety issues, the board puts it out there and puts it forth to town meeting. And, again, it's, that's what zoning happens. It's, it's that the whole conversation starts about, well, and there's a lot of people that agree, Starbucks shouldn't be there. It doesn't work. And, but, so to change that zoning, the conversation went down, well, there's an issue now. How do we know that this is going to help? They should be doing a traffic study and all of that. And so the conversation starts in the community, and then, so when you get to town meeting, there's outstanding questions. So if there's outstanding questions of, it gets to a certain threshold, then a zoning article will fail. So for this project, this was a 2-year process to have the comprehensive long-range plan updated, and the topic of potential redevelopments for mixed use and more village character and residential uses in the Thoreau Depot was an action item that was consistent through the long-range plan. And so that's how the conversation for this starts. Sorry.
Is this one?
Oh, not my TV.
Not my
so,
TV either.
Yeah,
There we go.
let's try that. So that's, so,
Okay, just my perception of it was Starbucks seemed like a very minor little change, changing the driveway or going around
well,
one building.
yeah,
This seems like significant change. And so Starbucks got voted down 90%. I don't know the perception of how you perceive this to be voted. So that's just my.
so it starts with,
So we'll see what happens. The other question I had was just how many people show up to vote
At town meeting,
last year?
oh,
Do you have a ballpark idea?
400, 500?
I don't know. I mean, last year was such,
It's a low turnout last year.
Well, with COVID for last.
well, yeah, it was outside, the first time it was ever outside, and with, COVID and separation, I don't think that's comparable. So mostly town meeting has been, it depends on what's on the agenda for,
You get a hot button issue.
if you have the schools,
Well,
it's
that's
a couple of thousand.
Number one thing, and then maybe, so there's sometimes some turnover in how many people are actually staying there.
But to your point, we try to hold, public meetings, which we did to get input at the very beginning. So we've had, at least 2 of those forums where people are coming, we'll have another hearing. And we, certainly send
Yeah, I know,
the town.
You
to-
try to reach out. The problem is people still don't know,
I mean, if you
I
have
stopped
to
by,
connect
I
them-
talked to the guy,
Sort of.
the guy at Goodwill.
Yeah.
I talked to him on a regular basis and he had no clue.
Is he a Concord resident?
I don't know, but he's right there and talks to a lot of people, and just neighbors that live right next door, not a clue, And so I understand you try to reach out, and it's difficult to figure out what the town wants.
That's such a good point, because we should be talking about what's our outreach for the December 14th forum. Like, are we doing flyers? Are we putting on next door?
So it's a flyer that will, and so hopefully have it finished by the end of this week, working with the community safety officer. So it's a flyer that will go to all of the property owners in the Thoreau Business District. Last time, for the last public forum, we also walked to the district and handed a flyer to each of the business owners. The flyer will also be, not a flyer, but maybe a postcard or a flyer, depends, will be mailed to, last time it went to like abutters to abutters, to residential, like for, 500 feet from the district. A flyer was individually mailed to all of those people. The sandwich board sign was put at the entrance to Crosby's Market. It was put in news and notices. It was put on the websites in 4 other different places. It was posted at the library, it was posted at town hall, it was posted at the
Okay,
town.
that sounds very comprehensive.
So that's what I'm saying. You talk to people and it's like they're not aware. There's only so much that can be done,
Yeah, I
and then
understand
it
it's a
becomes a
problem.
civic duty.
It's a problem.
Right,
You know,
and that's
it's-
like we could,
If you
like
want to be
butters to
informed
butters,
voter,
butters to butters doesn't seem very, because the whole neighborhoods are gonna be affected. Because to get.
technically, everybody is, but think about how many people come to town
Did you
meeting.
put
If you want to
Seymour?
participate in town governance, which is the way our town runs, then you need to take it upon yourself to learn a little bit more about what's going on. But
So as far as voting at town meeting, can you mail in a ballot?
no, you have to be present.
So
to do it.
if I have a good friend, she's in Concord Park, she's 90 years old in the assisted living. So she's a resident, but getting her to town meeting to vote seems like a hurdle, so she can't vote essentially.
Are you sure there's no accommodation for them?
I don't
That, well, that might be.
I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
There are a lot of, yeah, I mean, that's right, and there's a lot of people who just choose not to come.
I understand.
So, but, I,
But you think essentially it's a hard and fast rule, you have in-person voting only.
I'm
for all the
I'm
10 or
almost-
so years that I've gone every year. that's
I'm
my
almost
understanding.
100% positive that you have to be in person.
Because they're counting on
The
it.
town-
Just with the last COVID thing, it seemed like
Right.
there was more mail-in ballots, it was a hot button.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
sure.
it's possible they'll get to do some sort of electronic voting in the future.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
like American Idol. You probably have somebody online also who. may have-
The other thing I would say about the voting ahead of time is that because I think you may have heard, like, you can have 4 amendments, so it could change, that would make that difficult.
Sure.
And somebody voted for something that could change their vote.
Change, so, yeah.
But if
Sorry.
they had somebody who was physically disabled, I know they would do everything they could to like make accommodations for them to get them there. So if there was a person that had a problem, I know they could contact the town and get help and.
Yeah, no, the council on aging does
Oh, there
a
you go.
huge thing, and I believe Concord Park, they have a van. I actually think
Yeah.
they get people there as well.
All right, let's take, I'm just gonna go by who I see first on the screen, so Joe Stein, I think you spoke before, and you're the first one I see there, so please go ahead. Yep, you're ready to go.
All right, cool. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
For the
right, great.
moment.
Yeah, 21 Thoreau Street. I'm still a little confused, and I apologize. Is there a minimum density here that's required by law? So that's my first question. And what happens if we're not compliant with the MBA Community Act or whatever it's called?
Can you repeat the last question, just to make sure on our end cuts back and forth, so I want to make sure
Oh.
your second question fully.
Yeah, sorry about that. My connection's bad. Yeah, so we got the first question, is there a minimum density required by law? And the second one is, what happens if we're not compliant?
He's talking about the MBTA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And maybe we'll have to, in our information, make sure we're clear on the distinction.
So that was the other item that the board didn't get to, and that's the FAQ for the public forum. So there's 2 things working. So under the current zoning, there's no minimum or maximum density as far as if somebody has a combined business residence. The factors that drive it deal with, setbacks and parking and open space and all of those issues. And the density question comes from the new section that was adopted in the chapter 40A, section 3A of the zoning act that the legislature put in. I think it's a total of what, 5 sentences. And it's for MBTA communities. So it's any community that has an MBTA transit stop, whether it's bus, subway, or commuter rail. The requirement, if the town wants to be eligible for funding in 3 different programs, it's housing choice, which I believe the town of Concord, I think the housing authority often goes for housing choice funds. I can't think of the second one, but it's tied to the gaming commission. And so far, nobody has been able to tell me how those funds are collected or how those funds are allocated. But it has something to do with gaming revenue. And then the third one is the MassWorks program, which funds large infrastructure projects for communities. So for Concord, that may be upgrading the wastewater treatment plant, implementing a new public water supply, water treatment facility. The town could move forward and get a MassWorks infrastructure grant. And now I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if I could go for a MassWorks grant for the Assabet River pedestrian bridge. I'll have to look into that one. So if a community doesn't meet that, have a zoning area of a particular size, and we don't know what that size is yet, that if you do not have the zoning that allows by right residential units, residential at a density of 15 units per acre or more, then you will not be eligible for those grants. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, next, Carol Seymour. You're muted.
Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street. I have a question on the zoning law you went over tonight, 7.11.3.2. In that, you mentioned that if a 38-foot building was to be built, it had to be within 125 feet of a residential district. And our discussion of the 35-foot current zoning allows for 38 feet pitched roof or 48-foot pitched roof like Concord Crossing. So if Thoreau Street is currently at 35, if somebody built a pitched roof of 38 feet, would that have to be within 125 feet of a residential neighborhood?
I don't think it has gotten to that discussion until they figure out how they want to measure height. So I think, so currently on Thoreau Street, somebody could do a 35-foot high flat roof, or they could do a 10 pitch roof that could be 40 feet high. So I think it's figuring out, if the board measures to the peak instead of this mean average between the plate and the ridge, then the current proposal that was drafted MAPC did the first draft, they were thinking to the peak and not currently how the town measures it. So, 38 feet, somebody could do 40 feet right now, or 42 feet. So I think it's a conversation of continuing conversation on height when you start measuring to the ridge instead of the current calculation. So, with 38 feet to, 38 feet to the peak of a pitched roof. I mean, I don't know if the board, I don't think the board has figured that out yet until you figure out how you want to measure height and what that height limit is. I mean, so Concord Crossing is 42 feet high and it's not 125 feet from a residential district.
Right, but that was a special permit, so maybe they waived that at the time they did the special permit. I'm just trying to understand, and I think the public wants to understand, what can they build now? How do you measure the roof height? And is that, it sounds like today they can do a pitched roof on 38 feet or higher, and it can be, within 125 feet of a residential district, or can't it? That's what we want to know. The other question I had was, why is Thoreau Gardens, the residential community across from Starbucks and next to the mobile station, not included in the Thoreau Business District when we're talking about building housing and increasing housing, and it is housing?
Just to your, before I get to that question, for your last question, currently in the Thoreau Business District, there is no setback requirement for the front yard, the side yard. Let me see. There's no side yard setback requirements unless it abuts a residential district, 10 feet of which 5 shall be landscaped buffered. So the setback requirement currently is 10 feet. And the rear yard is also 10 feet. So you could have a 47-foot tall peaked house 10 feet from the property line
Building,
to the peak,
right,
or roughly.
building in the business district, right? What you're saying.
So I think it would be good if you at the forum, you explain what that is today and how your zoning is going to make that a better situation.
Yep. And then to your second question, I have no idea how the Thoreau Business District got defined or drawn. And, I'm not even sure when that residential project, there was a period of time, so when Concord Green was built, there was a garden apartment. And then when projects like Concord Green got built, people were up in arms at the density, and that provision got deleted. So I'm pretty sure that's how the project on Thoreau got built, was when that provision was in the garden apartment provision was in there. But how the district got drawn, I don't know.
Well, I think it would be good if you included it, because we're talking about, adding more housing, and there's plenty of green space there. There's plenty of opportunity to continue to build that out, which is already there, which is sustainable and green building. And I think it should be included.
So, which I'd be fine for that, but I can tell you that town meeting last year didn't want to move the Thoreau Business District 30 feet
Yeah.
behind Starbucks. And that's where you, to the previous question, that's where you measure the likelihood of a bylaw going through. If you were to extend the Thoreau Business District to cover that, then I can tell you it would not pass because it opens up so many other uses, more intense uses. And, you know, last year, the district was only gonna move 30 feet. And there was significant pushback on that to include something of that size. Because again, you get into the conversation of the lifespan of a building, and those buildings have been there quite a long time. So if you were to include that in the district, I think what the abutters down the street and what they think could happen there, that thought process would go to a level where it wouldn't pass town meeting. But again, that's
But the state created an incentive to build within a half mile of a T station.
there's no incentive.
But that,
It's a requirement and a penalty.
within a half mile?
Yeah.
Is the rule, so why isn't in a half mile in this situation?
So would Thoreau Gardens count?
Because that's within a half mile.
But you couldn't build Thoreau Gardens now at the density that it's at. There's no provision in the zoning bylaw any longer.
So
to
they're
allow
not
that
saying you
density.
have to have it built, they're saying you have to allow it to be built. That requirement from the state came way after the district was drawn.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we have to redraw some district in order to comply with that act. I mean, to include that provision, but.
Yeah, getting back to Thoreau Gardens, I mean, maybe the abutters don't want that kind of building on Thoreau Street, right? Where you're intending to change the zoning to allow it. And on Thoreau Gardens, some of those buildings are only 2 floors. You could put another floor, you could connect them. There's a lot of green space. You could tear them down like you're talking about tearing down Crosby's parking lot and building afresh and something green and sustainable and, with more housing. So I think it's you should not exclude that from the district. It is in the district. And why is it okay to build on Thoreau Street and Crosby's parking lot, but not build where there's already housing?
There's actually, a specific district that's defined with boundaries. And that's what Elizabeth was saying, and it's drawn very specifically, way back when it was. So we can't, for the purposes of what we're talking about, just say, well, the Thoreau Business District is defined plus this section.
That's in another district.
Right, that's in a residential district.
Well, I mean, you're changing the zoning here. Why can't you change the zoning there?
But that would apply to an entire other residence district. It would, so you can't just apply it to the one lot, is the thing.
No, you're applying it to, that's a commercial apartment building, exactly what you're talking about building in Thoreau and Crosby's.
It's still a single lot though.
So this is that, well, it's a rental project, which for somebody that's a commercial business, this is in a residential zone district. So
It's right next to the mobile station and across from.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This orange is a residential district, and this hashed area is the defined boundaries of the Thoreau Depot Business District. You would have to move the boundary of the Thoreau Depot Business District to allow that.
And that would have to be passed at town meeting.
And
as its own thing.
moving the district 30 feet right here last year, as you said, 90% of, it got defeated by over 90% voting against moving this 30 feet. if you were to move the whole entire district to cover this, somebody could come in, demolish every one of these buildings and build a really nice big Starbucks. And it doesn't mean somebody's going to redevelop this in a mixed use manner, or that they're going to add another floor to these buildings. So you can't just take the requirements of this district and apply it to this district. You would actually have to move the district boundary. And I can tell you, if you were to make this a commercial district, every person all along here would vote no. And every person all along here would vote no. Every person all over here, and
everybody that could get to come.
and everybody that could get to come would vote no. I'm
And
not,
don't you think they think the same thing about building up Thoreau Street, which is like a block away?
well, so there's been extensive community conversations the whole 2 years that the long-range plan was being developed. And from a community-wide discussion in the long-range plan, and the 2 years that the board has been working on this, people are in favor of having that mixed-use development in these village centers. It doesn't mean people in the residential districts want the commercial side of things to be moved out. I'm not saying that this land right here could not support more dense residential development. That's definitely entirely possible and something that could be looked at from a residential zone district. But to move a commercial district further this way is
Well, it would change the use.
I mean, yeah, that's a significant change in use, because it may not stay residential. You could put a provision, somebody could do a planned residential development and, potentially, look at creating more density as a residential project, but not necessarily moving the boundary line to make it commercial.
Got it. Well, I don't know if there's any way to make that a option for expanding the housing in Concord, because it's already housing to begin with. It's already residential, it's already apartments, and it's a lot of space to build.
There's definitely options to amend the zoning bylaw in the residential districts to allow more density. The board's been doing that incrementally. You have the accessory dwelling unit. You now have 2-family and residence C. It comes down to that community conversation of what would be a density that would be appropriate, and then how do you draft a zoning bylaw to make that happen in a residential district?
Okay, the other part I wanted to mention, when you're talking about, I think it was about reducing the parking, but you only wanted to reduce the parking in the Thoreau Business District and not make that applicable to other parts of the town or the other town centers. I would like to see that parking being consistent across all 3 villages. If you're going to change it for one, you should have the same change in all the other villages.
So I think that's what Kristen was alluding to, is that that's a larger project that the planning board will take up at some point in the future. We recognize that it obviously is a hot topic every time anything related to parking comes up. But I think the reason for not doing that now is to not sort of take away from the focus on put it another way, we wouldn't want something about parking that applies townwide to be what sinks, the topic of Thoreau
Derails.
Derails, thank you. The topic of Thoreau Depot, when that is sort of a very important topic, but one that will be addressed as a standalone issue townwide. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I don't think you should, take it off the table just because you're concerned about getting this passed or not, right? If you're gonna pass it for one part of town, it should be consistent across the rest of the community.
But I think in general, when we're thinking about any proposal, it's about weighing the things that, may make it more or less viable at town meeting.
Well, not that. I mean, I think anything we propose is because we're basing it on the long range plan and how we're trying to kind of fulfill that in terms of meeting the goals of the town. And these are ways that the planning board, plans to move things forward. I think regarding parking, parking is based on kind of the uses that are happening in those zoning districts. And so, as we're preparing for town meeting and, we have to prepare the warrant articles, and Elizabeth does a lot of work to help us get that ready. There's a lot of research that goes into it, so we wouldn't want to just say blanketly, okay, while we're doing this in this district, we're gonna do something, without kind of fully researching it. And so if the, I think that's what we want, that we want to make all of our proposals and our warrant articles kind of carefully researched and things like that. And this shouldn't be to a detriment to the existing village centers. And for each time, there's something that happens in West Concord Village that's kind of dealt with on its own. There's something that happens at town center. So often the three kind of centers are treated individually.
Okay.
Ms. Savoy, you have come to our meetings and brought a lot of really good points, and I want to thank you for coming to them. I did have a quick question. Well, hopefully it's quick because everybody's tired. So if it's not quick, you don't have to answer it right now.
home, so.
My question is, you've had some specific concerns about building height, and we're talking about 35, 38 feet. So we're kind of, I'm not going to say quibbling, but we're deciding on measuring some things like that. Can you summarize what your major concerns are regarding building height?
Sure. I think that the Thoreau Business District is a, charming New England village. And I think that I like to see trees and I like to see sky and I like to walk down the street without things towering over me. And if I wanted to live in some community with, a dense community with tall buildings and increased traffic, I would live in Cambridge or Arlington or Somerville or somewhere else. I live in Concord because I want parking, I don't want traffic, and I want trees and green space, right? So what you're doing and what you're proposing, with this zoning change is basically building 95 new housing units in an already dense, congested area and changing the character of the Thoreau Depot district forever. And I happen to live right next to it. I've lived next to it for 18 years. And you're going to build a 38-foot building that's going to cast shadows in my yard. I'm going to have people living, 3 floors up, staring in my yard, in my bedroom, in my kitchen. I'm going to have trouble parking. It's, we think it's plenty vibrant the way it is. Right?
Thank you. I appreciate you summarizing.
Actually, I just have one last quick comment. So I got a quote for solar today. It was fascinating. They could see the whole house, aerial view. It was a Zoom meeting. And I said, well, they may be building next to us. So if we put in solar and you build and you block the sun, are you violating my property rights? Just a thought that came into my mind because, if we actually go forward and put solar in and then you build and have shade and you block the solar.
But somebody could build currently.
Yeah.
Well, technically they can build, but according to your zoning laws and why you want to change it, they can't technically because they don't have enough parking spots and they don't have enough, whatever, so many square feet. And that's why you're changing the zoning so they can build. That's the issue.
Well,
The other thing I looked up is the population of
mind.
Concord for the last 30 years. And population hasn't really gone up that much. The last 10 years, it went up like 400 people, 200 people or something. There was a little bump before and it came back down. But I was just wondering, is there a need to grow? Do we want to add more people?
So,
Is that the objective?
So population, also what most people don't understand, includes the prison. The prison used to have a few thousand people.
I noticed in the middle of the decade, it went up and then it came down.
I
So
think
that
there's
could
only
be
eight, I think there's 800
the-
at the maximum prison. So that's also a factor with population that most people don't realize, is that the two prisons, that population is included in Concord's overall population as far as the census.
The town, the town has a housing production plan every 10 years.
Five to six.
Because it didn't add up.
Yeah.
Every couple of years, and it looks specifically at population, housing, and the need. So that would be more
Yeah.
specific to, I think, what.
There's actually a funny article in the Wall Street Journal a week ago. I was going to send it to you guys. The guy said he built the perfect town. Problem was now everybody comes there and it's too many people.
Well, I think we already, well, if it's really.
So
as
that's
funny,
the
you
problem,
send
right?
it
You
to
have a
us.
perfect town.
You know,
It's
you
like,
need to
yeah,
comment really.
everyone wants to, the schools are great, everyone
Well,
wants to be there.
It is a lovely town, that's for sure. We're from
And
Houston. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And consider-
Yes.
It was very entertaining.
Oh, good. You're welcome.
Much better than the Patriots.
All right,
the
we'll
Patriots
we'll push
playing?
all the other things till.
Yeah.
next meeting.
Keep
Yes.
pushing off. Yep.
So, but I think like we got done with FAR, I don't think we need to have a substance discussion on that, really. But yeah, so that's good.
Thank you, everybody, for participating, and thank you to the other board members. And